a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time.
Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or
Hello, a very good morning to you. Just after 6 o'clock on Sunday, March the 9th. I have to start today's show by saying a very happy 50th birthday to my gorgeous sister Katie for tomorrow. So very happy birthday indeed. Now, if you are just joining us, great news, as you would expect. It's Barbie Day. Yes, that's right, a day celebrating the iconic doll. And if you live near a Showcase cinema and go and see Barbie the movie wearing pink today, you'll get a free ice cream.
Come on, Barbie, let's go party.
I'm a Barbie girl in the Barbie world.
Now, also today, it is National Dishwasher Appreciation Day. Yes, such a day really does exist, a day that recognises the convenience that this appliance brings to our lives. Josephine Garris Cochrane came up with the idea of using water pressure to clean the dishes, and so creating the concept we still use today. Hurrah, I say. Resounding sound of the dishwasher late at night before it spills all over the floor. It's also National Meatballs Day today. It's a hearty homage to the meat dish in all its glory, encompassing traditional recipes to those encouraging a fusion of unique flavours.
We love meatballs, meaty balls, meaty balls, meaty balls, meaty balls, meatballs. I love meatballs.
There you go. We love the meaty meatballs. There we go. The time, 3 minutes past 6. Let's start this morning's show, shall we?
Today's fascinating facts.
So today's fascinating facts: on this day in 1763, the birth of William Cobbett. Now, who was he? Well, he was an English political journalist who championed the working class and became its first leader. On this day in 1881, the birth in Winsford, Somerset, of Ernest Bevin. Really important man, actually, Ernest Bevin. One of the founding leaders of the Transport and General Workers Union, or TGWU, which soon became Britain's largest trade union. He was Minister of Labour during the Second World War and created Bevin's Boys. If you remember who they were young men chosen by ballot to work down the mines as part of their war service. And on this day in 1891, 4 days of storms began off England's south coast, sinking, amazingly, 14 ships. And those are this morning and this hour's fascinating facts.
It's the weekend wave, let the fun unfold. With a jolly little tune, let the laughter be told. On top of David and Charlie, let's go home. Reviewing the news, come on, steal the show.
Well, a very good morning to you. 5 minutes past 6 on Sunday, March the 9th, on National Meatball Day. Now, I can't think of a better person to be here on National Meatball Day than Charlie Rowley, Special Advisor, former Special Advisor, political extravaganza.
Oh.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Lovely to see you.
Do you like a meatball?
Well, if it's on the menu, I will.
So I didn't know this, but meatballs are ground meat, obviously, rolled into a ball. Funnily enough, called meatballs. But they are, you get then put breadcrumbs with them, minced onion, eggs, butter and seasoning. You can cook them by frying, baking, steaming or braising in sauce. You can have meatless versions.
Well, there's no fun in that, is there?
Fun.
What's the point?
No. You can have legumes and vegetables and mushrooms and fish or seafood. Apparently, actually, meatballs go back to Roman times.
Well,
which I'm not entirely surprised by.
No.
Bits of old meat, ground together, shoved into a ball.
What did you just call the Romans? Bits of old meat.
Bits of old meat. They also are in some of the earliest known Arabic cookbooks, generally featuring lamb, of course, glazed with egg yolk and sometimes saffron. Now, pomme d'orange is a gilded meatball dish from the Middle Ages. And it's really interesting, actually. I was looking at all the names for meatballs. This is what I do on a Saturday afternoon. I was looking at all the names for meatballs in various countries.
Hopefully not on a work laptop.
No, exactly. Well, let's have a look at your history. What are you Googling?
HR.
I'm Googling meatballs. So in Belgium, they're called balex or bulletin. In Austria, they're called Fleischleibenchen. In Great Britain, faggots, of course. A type of spicy pork meatball.
Yes. Yes.
We had faggots at school.
Well,
I did.
Well, yes, and also it's. I remember actually, it's still served on menus today. I was in Sidmouth. And
Good Lord.
I know.
Where is Sidmouth?
I was passing through. It's in the southwest.
Oh, is it?
It's in the southwest.
I'm sure it's very nice.
Devon,
right,
I think.
Yes.
And I was at a restaurant, and the waitress walked by, and she sort of said, 2 faggots, and I sat up right. But it was right. On the menu. But is it also part of the Christmas song? You know. Is it you cheap lousy faggot?
Oh yes, it is in the Pogues. Very good.
Yes.
I don't think it was about meatballs.
No.
A faggot is traditionally made from pig's heart, liver, and a fatty cut of pork, mixed with herbs for flavouring and sometimes breadcrumbs. In Denmark, they're frikadelle. In Estonia, the liha pallid. In Finland, oh, I've done that one. In France, they're boulettes de viande. Little balls of meat. Anyway, I think that's enough about meatballs for the moment. But anyway, National Meatball Day. So if you're stuck for inspiration as to what to cook today, the answer is meatballs. Can I just say a very good morning to Jean and Mike Danza from the United States, big fans of the show, who I happened to meet on a cruise last year, and they've been in touch to say they don't miss a show. So a very good morning to Jean and Mike Danza as well. Now, you know a great deal about politics. It obviously will have struck you that Reform UK is making the headlines for all the wrong reasons at the moment. The story has moved on. Let me just show you the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. This is the copy on the right-hand side. Farage. Reform infighting will only hurt us at the ballot box. Nigel Farage has warned that Reform UK's hopes of electoral success will be damaged if it descends into further infighting over the expulsion of one of its MPs. We talked extensively about this yesterday, about Rupert Lowe, and this battle that is going on social media between him and Nigel Farage. I suggested it might be a really good idea if they took this offline and didn't talk about it in social media, where everyone just comments. And in fact, many young people were commenting yesterday saying, boys, stop. Just stop airing your dirty laundry in public. I just wonder what your thoughts are. Nigel's point is very valid. Reform UK is doing very well. In fact, according to the latest polls, it's still polling second behind Labour. This was according to YouGov, I think. And the question is, what Reform does from here?
Well, lots in there. You're absolutely right. It's been a fascinating couple of days, I think, for Reform. I think it's been a bit of an awakening, actually, for the party, because they are ahead in the polls, and when you get ahead in the polls, there comes more scrutiny. And it's not just about policy, it's not just about, media interviews, it is about personality, and it is about relationships. And you're absolutely right, to have this relationship breakdown so publicly is actually quite off-putting. There are But everybody, I think, has to take a bit of responsibility. So there are the... I think what Reform have done in terms of its treatment of Rupert Lowe is probably the right thing. There have been allegations against Rupert Lowe by people in his parliamentary office. That needs to be investigated.
So, the allegations came from two sources, the parliamentary office and also the constituency office. Now, my understanding of the timeline is those allegations and complaints were made to the party. The party started to investigate those. This is according to the party, and I spoke to the party yesterday. At which point, Rupert Lowe did the story with the Mail. The party then made that investigation public. This is my understanding of that chronology. Now, what yesterday I was kind of trying to get my head around was whether Rupert had done that interview first and then the investigation was launched subsequently, or was it actually the other way around? And my understanding, having talked to the party sources, and they would say this, wouldn't they? But they said those allegations were made, that investigation was carried out already. And we'll talk about this, but there is a lot of sort of claim and counterclaim going on between Reform and Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe.
And I think the more that actually is aired in public, which is not good for the party, it's not a good look.
Not at all.
I think actually more facts come out and more things come to light. So, look, for example, Mike Tapp, Labour MP, said that he had to be restrained by Richard Dice because he had a bit of an altercation with Rupert Lowe.
Do you want to just explain that? Because it's a really important point.
Yes, so I think it was there was some sort of division, it must have been a vote, I'm assuming, but it was in the corridor, it seemed to me that Mike Tapp, Labour MP, after these allegations came out, went public to say that Richard Tice had to intervene between him and Rupert Lowe because Rupert had sort of challenged him in the corridor and I wouldn't go as far to say have him up against the wall, but sort of had him sort of by the bells. Now, whether or not that was just in jest or whether it was Rupert sort of having an older sort of view of doing things and Mike didn't take very kindly to that or thought, well, why is this man actually putting any kind of hand on me rather than sort of, whether it was in jest or fun or whatever, there had to be some sort of intervention. So that was telling. What was also interesting was that Lee Anderson obviously was tweeting the chief whip who's had to take the whip away from Rupert, you're absolutely right, who sort of said that he'd spent a lot of time and he'd given a lot of leeway to Rupert over the last sort of few months. Now we don't know enough about that. So what else is happening, or what else has been going on?
Let's just go back to this Mike Cain thing, and this is an article which is in the Telegraph this morning. It was the last parliamentary debate of the year. Mr. Lowe, who represents Great Yarmouth, asked Mike Cain, the Transport Minister, a question about the MV Ruby. That's a damaged cargo ship which had docked in his constituency, was carrying hundreds of tons of the potentially explosive fertiliser ammonium nitrate. Mr. Lowe, this is according to the Telegraph, was unhappy with the answer he received from Mr. Cain, and at the end of the debate he crossed the floor to make his feelings known. A confrontation then ensued. Heated language was heard. The minister's shoulder was pushed. In the end, the sergeant-at-arms had to step in to calm things down between the two parliamentarians. Mr. Cain told a news outlet that the anger displayed towards me clearly showed a man not in charge of his own faculties. Nobody in Reform said anything publicly about what had happened. That is the copy in the Telegraph.
And that's the story. Yeah, my apologies. I think I said it was Mike Tapp earlier on, but it's right. It's Mike Cain who's the minister. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. And so again, it's just a pattern of behaviour, perhaps that is emerging. Well, there are things that are clearly have been going on behind the scenes where maybe that the interview was the tip of the iceberg. Maybe actually there were other things that Reform needed to act. But you would be damned if you didn't act. This is, I think, what Nigel is saying today.
And that's a really good point.
If all of a sudden it emerged 6 months down the line that there was allegations by two individuals, two women, both, as you absolutely rightly said at the start, one in a parliamentary office, one in the constituency, where allegations weren't looked into, then, of course, Reform would have just this kind of scrutiny it has, but it would be worse off because it would be seen to be sort of, brushing things under the carpet, not taking things seriously. How could they be a serious party?
And you see, this is the problem, and obviously I've been there since the beginning. This is the problem as you become a bigger party and you change your structures and corporate governance and all those things, and you have to go from what was a protest party, I assume, and a one party, and it was a one-issue party, wasn't it, with Brexit, and obviously then morphed into Reform. The problem is that as you professionalise that party, you will always have problems. The Conservative Party has problems with individual MPs. The Labour Party has problems with different different MPs as well. But you have to then develop structures and governance to deal with those issues as they arise. Now, the big problem for Reform now is the donors, and there is significant money flowing into Reform UK now, don't like it. And in the Telegraph again this morning, Mohammed Mercy, a former Tory donor, he paid £25,000 to attend a fundraiser for Reform in January, said if these divisions continue until the time of the election, they will not be electable and people will not fund it. But, he went on to say, it's too early to say. So the stakes couldn't be higher.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And I think, look, Mohammed Mercy, they're sort of saying until the next election. So, you've got a few years to go. And this will be, I think, a lesson for Reform. I don't think it's the end. Of course it's not, because...
I was going to ask you that. Is the party over for Reform?
No, of course not, because, by and large, and this is where people who are at the very top of Reform, understandably, are obsessing about, obviously, the polling, which is absolutely right, because it's looking positive, but they are looking at the Westminster view. Most people outside of Westminster probably still don't quite know who Rupert Lowe is. They know who Nigel is.
That's a very interesting point.
It is, I'm afraid, a one-man show, to a degree. That is not a problem.
Isn't the Tory party a one-woman show at the moment? Kemi Badenoch?
Exactly. You people don't vote Labour, or people weren't looking at the Labour Party thinking, oh gosh, I'm going to vote for my local MP. When Sir Keir Starmer had been there for he was front and centre of the national campaign when it was Rishi, as it is Kemi now. She's on her renewal project 2030. Of course, it's the leader that you always look to. So anyone that's got an ego, or anyone that wants to sort of try and do things differently. I mean, Rupert, said he's trying to have conversations behind closed doors. That's absolutely fine. Maybe he needed an answer. If it wasn't the answer that he wanted, then maybe you need to work that out.
So Rupert says he has reached out on numerous occasions to Nigel Farage and to the team, and he wants to meet them. According to Nigel Farage, they responded. Rupert then ignored them. So who knows? I mean, who knows?
Exactly.
But what we do know is that Reform is fielding 1,500 candidates in May's local council and mayoral elections. And actually, for those individual candidates, I feel very sorry because being a candidate, and this, is not easy.
Yes.
And you have to bang on doors, and you actually have to put a lot into this. They're not paid people that go and canvass and knock on doors and all the rest of it. And people have put their reputation on the line. And the last thing they want is squabbling and infighting in the heart of the party.
Exactly. And this is the thing. So, as you sort of indicated before, if you're the leader of the party, people look to... So people, even if you're a local candidate, and I'm sure everyone that stands in a local election, fair play to you, you go and... It's tough because a lot of public anger is taken from the national picture. So there'll be people who have joined Reform that want to sign up because of Nigel. There'll be lots of people who are disaffected Tories and Labour, and the reason why they've gone to Reform is because they do want a new approach to politics and because they don't want the infighting that they've seen, particularly amongst the Conservative Party, chopping and changing its leader every 5 minutes. They want to have they're going for an optimistic party, a party that seems to be united, a party that wants to do things differently, that wants to cut through all the waste and bureaucracy that we've seen over the last decades through Labour and the Tories. Now, people are seeing a party that there's division at the top, and they don't like it. People don't like division.
I don't blame them,
and
actually.
So it will be difficult for those candidates. But I think the way to get over this is for if Rupert's extended an invitation for Nigel to have dinner, go and have dinner, maybe sort it out, but take it offline, as you say, but also focus on whoever comes on, a bit of a free advice for anyone in Reform.
I'd bill them if I was you.
Yes, oh no, just do that. Yeah. Speak to my agent. Always focus on the positives. Okay, there's been a huge public rift between two very, very senior, very, very successful individuals who talk each other up. They're both very successful. They've got a difference of a view here. I'm sad to say it's gone public, but the reality is both men still believe in X, Y, Z, and they still share the same values.
Common purpose.
So, focus on those positives, focus on why you're part of the Reform project, or why you're even part of it in the first place. And, OK, it's unfortunate and it's sad and all the rest of it, but focus on those key issues that people care about.
And so just in terms of that, I mean, obviously Rupert Lowe said Reform was a protest party led by the Messiah. These are hurling grenades. And then Rupert, just to be clear, and to give Rupert's side of the story, he says, let me be abundantly clear on one thing. There is no credible evidence against me. None has been provided. Reform has removed me from the party. Before any investigation has started, they have conflated the complaints to insinuate I'm guilty. I will not tolerate these falsehoods and the discussions that have already taken place with my legal team. It is a surprise. Is it a surprise that the allegations were made public the day after I made reasonable criticisms of Nigel Farage and Reform? Meanwhile, Lee Anderson has then waded into all of this. Lee Anderson says Reform UK cannot function with Rupert Lowe as one of the MPs. The party's chief whip has said, which makes me think that he's about to be chucked out of the party for good. What does that mean for the future of Reform UK? Can they actually patch things up? That remains to be a question that is unanswered. And of course, you've also got these accusations that he made physical threats against Zia Youssef, the chairman. Now, this morning, or was it late last night, Rupert Lowe then tweeted saying Zia Youssef must go. This is very unedifying.
It is, and I think when you're in a situation clearly that Rupert's in, and the way in which probably Reform have been able to galvanise support is through social media, it's through TikTok, it's through X. And you know, Rupert has a big following on social media. It's undeniable. So this is his platform, and I think if you do feel, sometimes we all feel, if we've been pushed into a corner or wronged or whatever, you look for support wherever you can get it. And if he's getting it online through supporters and people that actually back, then that is a comfort.
Well, let me just ask you this:
reality.
do you think the problem is that actually, I'm putting this out there as a question, that Rupert shoots from the hip, he says exactly what he thinks. Is it a problem that people like Elon Musk have liked him and retweeted him, and so in many ways he's in his own echo chamber where he actually believes he's bigger than the party? And let me be very clear, no individual is ever bigger than a political party.
It's not a problem, but you're absolutely right. But it's managing those relationships, and it's managing that support base. That's why being in politics, and that's why you're always kind of walking a tightrope, because yes, politics is divisive, but if you're on the up, you don't want to have these divisions. You want to amass as much support as you possibly can, wherever you can get it from. Now, there are some sections of society where you actually need to say thank you for your support, but no thank you, as I think was right in the case of Tommy Robinson. Now, there's a lot of people that might support Tommy Robinson. There might be a lot of people that are in Reform that support him. But Nigel has taken a stance that actually there are allegations there, and there's a whole sort of legal whatever he's going through, which isn't something that Reform as a party that's optimistic, that's fresh, that's new, that's galvanising support from former Labour members in the north, that Red Wall, former Tories that are fed up with the way in which that party is managed. That is what they're trying to achieve, and so it's about managing where that support comes from and all those relationships in between. So it's not a problem. But you're right. The echo chamber, David Cameron, a name which might send shivers down my spine. But he was absolutely right when he gave an interview very early on when social media was. He said, Twitter and the reality in the world, they're not the same thing.
Yes.
There are many people out there that don't know who Rupert Lowe is, that might be reading about him for the first time. I'm sorry to break that to you, Rupert. But there'll be people out there that have got absolutely no idea what this is about, but still regard Nigel Farage having the longevity that he's had in politics, all the things that he's the reason why Reform are doing so well. And I'm afraid to say, if you want to see the breakup of the two-party system, if you want to see a different kind of politics, I'm afraid you're just going to have to, dare I say it, if you're a little bit of a, maybe you're a former deputy leader of Reform that might be sort of touring, who's disaffected with Nigel, from time to time. Just shut up. Go away.
Well, to be fair, you make a great point. So when Richard and I were there and we resuscitated the party and kept it going, then when Nigel rejoined, we saw a meteoric rise in ascendancy, and there is no doubt in my mind those two are linked.
Yes, exactly. And for all the great work that no doubt that you and Richard did, obviously I'll bill you. You can bill me later. Getting the grassroots all sorted. That's fine. Or getting the base. It's the party where it was able to elect 5 MPs, something that people
4 million votes.
4 million votes, which people sort of scoffed at. So and if, as you say, by the latest polls, people have just got to cool heads.
So what does this mean for the Tory party? Are they sitting there in their ivory towers, rubbing their hands, thinking, hurrah, this is the demise of Reform UK? Kemi Badenoch on the ascendancy. Actually, there's another very interesting story this morning where she says we're going to disapply the ECHR when it comes to matters of immigration. I read that this morning and said, hallelujah, this is the right approach. Is this the moment where actually the Conservatives remember what it is to be conservative?
Maybe it's at the Tory Party HQ, yes. And if you're part of the bubble, you'll think, oh, how exciting! Reform have imploded. Right, everybody's going to come running back to the Tories. They're not. That's not how. This is a marathon. This is a long game. And if you talk to anybody out there on the street today, again, people might not know who Rupert Lowe is before this story. But if you ask them then to say, well, hold on, okay, you've got those problems in reform. The Tories are now saying they want to leave the EHCR. People will just say they should have done that 14 years. They've had 14 years to do that. Why start now? So it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. There will always be ups and downs. People will come into the spotlight, they'll leave, stage left or right. Kemi will have problems as there are bumps in the road. I'm sure there'll be more for reform. It's how you manage that, and it's how you manage the negative of all those stories, and how you can put a positive light on it to win back public support, to win ultimately the view of the British people to get yourself elected.
Charlie, thank you very much for the moment. Let me ask that question of all of you this morning. Do you think the party is over for Reform UK, or is this, as Charlie says, just a bump in the road? Let me know your thoughts, please. The time is 6:26. The number 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well at talkTV. After the break, we'll take you through more of this morning's stories. Let me just show you this. Sunday Express, 6.6 billion quid. That is the cost, wait for this, of asylum seeker support revealed. That includes all sorts of aids, eye-watering costs for council schemes like trips to the Emirates Stadiums, the London Zoo. What are we doing? This is Weekend Breakfast.
And I think you'll find that many people in this country think that Keir Starmer was one of the worst prime ministers we've ever had. And if you can find me a tranche of people who don't think that, then good bloody luck to you. You can probably put them on the
He's a very unpopular prime minister, but, Mike, the opinion polls show that public opinion actually thinks he's handled the Ukraine situation quite well.
Yeah, but, you can't just hang on to that, because everybody knows that you might think he's handled it well. I mean, are you really seriously going to tell me that when you watched him last Thursday in the Oval Office, you didn't sit there and just cringe?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 6:30. I'm joined by the lovely Charlie Rowley this morning. Good morning, Dr. Bull. This is Sharon Miller. Sharon says, I know it is going to be a fantastic show this morning when I see you and Charlie Rowley together. Dr. Bull, despite reforms infighting, it will not affect them at the elections. Reform are the best government to put this country in order. The public will not vote for the Labour Party or the Tory Party because they are absolutely useless and they've had enough and time in power and they cannot do anything right. It is now reform's time. That's Sharon in Staffordshire. Thank you very much for that. Good morning, David. This is Sean. David, the fact that Reform are under such close scrutiny by the media is a massive compliment and a sign that the establishment is scared by them. People have had enough of the Labour and Tory merry-go-round of doing nothing and ignoring our wishes. It's time for a fresh approach, and that is Reform. There will be bumps in the road on the way to power, as you say. Does any other party with so few MPs get such in-depth coverage? It's a great point.
But only because of your, you become a victim of your own success. And, when you do go ahead in the polls and when you are in such a lead and commanding position, and particularly in the run-up to local elections, despite some of them being cancelled, unnecessarily in my view, but, you will get that scrutiny.
What do you make of this? This is Andy in Notts. Good morning to you. Andy says, good morning, David and Charlie. Regarding Reform UK, I am a one-term member. I will not be renewing my membership. Where my vote now goes depends on policies. I already feel cheated. We members are all owners, we were told. Who elected the chairman? See Youssef. Who elected him? I never got a vote. It's still very grubby. It's amateurish. I will return to being a floating voter.
Well, that last bit is obviously very key because it's not someone who's saying, oh, right, OK, I've dabbled with Reform, but now I'm retreating back to being a Tory or the Labour Party because they're doing great things in Ukraine, for example. So being a floating voter still means that you're up for grabs. But look, I think the Reform, what I think people like about Reform and what is endearing is the fact that I think people are understanding. And most people are understanding about most things. If you can explain it properly and if you can get on top of it, people will understand that it is very new still. It is going to have these teething problems. It is trying to professionalise things because it has come from... And this is where maybe language matters. Maybe on this particular occasion it mattered a bit more to Nigel than it should have done. If somebody calls Reform a protest party, I can understand why that might be a little bit insulting to him.
The same terminology.
Exactly. So I think, OK, but languages, I don't think that should matter too much because it's a movement. It's trying to do something new, whether it's a protest or a party protest that is wanting to be into government, nothing wrong with that, or whether it's trying to be a government in waiting. There's a journey that you can go on to do all of these things.
And it's interesting, there's another message here from Paul in Luton. Good morning to you. Hi, David. Rupert Lowe is very confused. First of all, he says Nigel is too messianic-like and needs to loosen his total control. And then he tweets he needs to take back control from Zia. So it's all very confusing. I think it's also worth remembering something else. And I was thinking about this in bed. It is thanks to Nigel that Rupert became a member of the European Parliament. Because Nigel phoned Rupert and asked him to stand. Nigel phoned me and asked me to stand. Without Nigel, neither of us would have sat in the European Parliament.
Well, I never got the call, I'm afraid.
Well, there's a reason.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
But you're right. People have to understand when egos are at play, and there might be some bruised egos. And I sort of alluded earlier on that Ben Habib, that I know probably did a lot of work for Reform, and helped.
He's on the warpath as well.
But these things are not helpful. But you will always find people who are critical. It just seems to me that because these are big businessmen and these are big personalities, that things are coming out in the open.
Is that the problem? That actually what you've got here is two very strong personalities, both very successful in their own right. I defended Rupert yesterday. He is a farmer, he's a businessman, he's incredibly successful. He was chairman of Southampton Football Club. And essentially you've got someone who is not used to being told what to do. And as a parliamentarian, there are rules that you subscribe to when you are a member of Parliament, and you act not as an individual but as part of a team. And I'm wondering if that is part of the problem.
I think it possibly is. Look, I totally agree that you need more people in politics that have got business experience, people that have run things, people that have done things, people that can cut through the waste, people that can just, like Rupert, to his credit. And the reason why he's become so popular is because he does say things as he sees it. He's not afraid, maybe because of his success. There's no fear of the media if you say what you actually mean, which is to stop migrants or to deport people or whatever it is his view is. He talks very plainly, very strongly, because he's a very successful individual. And that and that garners respect. And I support him all the way in things that he's done in the past in that respect. But politics isn't just about business people and because you then retreat into your silos, you retreat into your comfort zone. It is a team game. You have to be united, and there'll be things where you have to, like in business, I'm afraid, you have to compromise. And even if it's just for show, even if it's the most tedious part of your job, just turning up here or having to make a speech there, when you've got 5 MPs and you're having to do a lot in terms of whether it's parliamentary debate or whether you're having to do a lot to be on top of your game and to present yourself in a way in which is sort of a way that you might not feel or care about because you're successful in your own right, but you've just got views, well, that's when it all falls apart. So it is a team game. You have to be united. You have to present a united front, even if you can't stand each other at times.
Yeah.
And,
but it's like being in a family where you fall out, isn't it? And then you don't air your dirty laundry in public.
And this is why the scandals become so big, because, it's like a family photo.
It was interesting. I mentioned this yesterday. Ben then dragged me into this, and he says Reform was always going to win seats in the GE. We were polling at 16%. Then Nigel appointed himself leader. We got 14% of the vote, which was bang in line with the polling. The seats we won was down to the hard work put in by hundreds of loyal activists who worked for years under the leadership of Richard Tice, David Bull and myself. And I was like, don't bring me into this in the middle of this, sort of airing of dirty laundry. Anyway, let's move on. Let's talk about this, because this is going to exercise people this morning. Let me show you the front page of the Sunday Express. 6.6 billion quid. I thought there was no money, by the way. There's no money. Big fiscal hole. No. 6.6 billion. Cost of asylum. This isn't the cost of asylum seekers. This is the cost of asylum seekers' support. What do I mean by that? So we paid £6.6 billion on asylum seeker and refugee support schemes. Wait for this. This is trips to the zoo and tennis lessons. This is according to the Sunday Express. It also includes sandwich deliveries, friendship services, a visit to Arsenal. The idea behind all of this is to help them integrate into British life. I'll tell you what, I quite like a trip to the zoo or Arsenal or whatever. Also, all of these schemes, the massive cost was racked up in 200 government and local council-funded schemes over the past few years. So the people in the Wethersfield Asylum accommodation site were given £20,000 worth of sports coaches and equipment for activities such as volleyball, tennis, athletics, 4 times a day, more than most children get. Hundreds of thousands of pounds have been given to befriending schemes where asylum seekers and refugees were given a mentor. How about teaching them English? Also, they were then given SIM cards. Now, apparently, according to the Home Office, each of these asylum seekers have to have 60 gigabytes of data. What are you doing with 60 gigabytes of data? Don't you just need a phone?
Yes, well, not downloading Duolingo, I should imagine, but...
No! Well, maybe they should be given Duolingo.
Maybe, but interesting, I'm a frequent visitor to Arsenal.
Yes, you are.
I am, yes, and they are sponsored by Visit Rwanda.
Is that right?
So you never know that they've
right?
under
really
the Tories they might have been visiting Rwanda a bit quicker than what they are now, because it's obviously been scrapped.
We spent 2.388 million on accommodation, according to this. Actually, Rupert Lowe features in this article as well. And Rupert Lowe says, "Hang on a minute. What they need is help to unlock their skills. We need them to be taught English. We need them to integrate. I don't think they need trips to the zoo."
No. And I think this is where people will wonder who's cooked up this idea, where has it come from, who's responsible, and and that's when we need to get to the nitty-gritty of what officials, so who actually has said to local authorities probably as well to say, look, there's a pot of money here, and we probably need to spend this pot of money because we don't want to face cuts from the Treasury next year, so we've got to spend this, it's got to get it out the door. How about to integrate and to dress it up as some sort of integration programme? Because, of course, if people come into this country and they've been legally allowed to come into this country and they've been processed in the right way and they get asylum or for whatever reason, then, of course, you want people to integrate. You want people to speak English.
£1 million quid on SIM cards?
But that is outrageous. And, people, as I say, people going on trips to the zoo, that is a day out is not part of it. You can do that in your spare time if you want to. proper integration is about the language, it's about the culture, it's about trying to get the skills and education to get a job in this country and to make a contribution to the country. It is not freebies, days out, and friendships.
So let's look at the figure. 108,000 people applied for asylum in the UK in 2024. That's the highest number for any 12-month period since records began in 2001. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, and obviously Keir Starmer has come into power and says he will deal with the immigration problem into this country, illegal immigration to this country. I haven't seen any evidence of that so far, and I think also he's realised that this is much more difficult than he first imagined. And just in terms of those numbers, that it is utterly off the scale. We have 38,000 housed in hotels. Just think about that. And I was talking about this when I was driving home. Some of the hotels along the route down the A12 have been cordoned off. They've been used by asylum seekers, been bought by the Home Office. Well, I'll tell you what, I quite like to be in a hotel and being looked after and having 3 meals a day. In terms of illegal immigration, this year alone, 3,200. What's the solution?
Well, I don't want to keep referring back to
Rwanda,
to Rwanda or Rupert, but Rupert, I think Rupert Lowe came up with I think he's been banging on about a phrase which says sort of detain, deport. I would have a third D, which is the first D, which is deterrent. And you're right, Rwanda, for all of its ills and for however much money it's spent, I think people would rather see money going to a programme that might deter people in the first place. And if you have that deterrent, then if you do get into the country and you're not supposed to be here, if you're an economic migrant, if you're not seeking refuge, if you're clearly not someone that's going to make a contribution, if you're clearly just trying to cheat the system, then you'll be detained, you will be deported, you would have gone to Rwanda. Now, obviously, that was scrapped on day one of this Labour government. As you say, they're finding it, I think, a lot more difficult now than what they thought they would.
So do I.
And nobody should let them off the hook, by the way, because they will, I'm absolutely convinced, in about a year or so's time, maybe even later this year at a party conference somewhere, Sir Keir Starmer will get up, or Vet Cooper will say, we have dealt with the backlog of all this. That just means that they would have granted
them all in.
Asylum. Exactly. Yeah. And we cannot allow that to be the answer to say we've cleared the backlog and now we can deal with the processing.
So the other big story this morning, and I did look at this and thought this is very interesting, and the Conservatives are now saying the Human Rights Act should no longer apply to immigration decisions. They're calling for a change in the law. So essentially you cannot challenge your deportation on the basis of human rights. Now, I think there will be people around this country thinking, hallelujah, at last, some common sense. Just looking back at all of this, do you remember the Albanian migrant wasn't deported because his son won't eat foreign chicken nuggets? The Pakistani paedophile father not deported, the woman granted asylum after joining a proscribed terrorist group, the Zimbabwean paedophile allowed to stay in the UK. All of this is abuse of the system, and you cannot then say, as a drug dealer in one of these, a convicted drug dealer, I can't go back to my country of origin because I might be persecuted. I don't care.
Yes.
Out.
Exactly. If you're a criminal, exactly. If you're a criminal gang in this country, if you're a criminal, if you break the law, whatever, of course you shouldn't be having the right to stay. And also, when you then find, just to add to that, list of, the courts in the UK allowing people to apply from Gaza through a Homes for Ukrainian scheme, something that was specifically set up. And this is what riles me, because it is the UK government, whatever the colour of the government, whether it's red, blue, turquoise, yellow, colours of the Rainbow Coalition, whatever, it is the government of the day that should decide who it is accepting into this country and who it isn't. And so we've been very generous over the past to obviously offer asylum to people from Afghanistan, from Syria, from China, from Ukraine, obviously. So we've done a lot in that respect. But we can decide, because we can see conflicts that are going across the world, and we can say, right, we're going to help a European ally, we're going to help someone that is a group of people that are really being persecuted in terms of human rights. They are more than welcome into this country, and we will deal with the processing because we know that you're coming, and we can facilitate those flights, and we can facilitate the accommodation because we know the numbers, we know what we've got, and we know that you will obviously be integrated into the country because you are fleeing clearly something that the world can see. What we can't accept are people just hopping on a dinghy, coming across. It's a perilous journey. There are too many dangers. Of course, people give up their whole life savings to these criminal gangs just to hop in a boat and come over. But, people that enter this country that have no right to be here, that are just economic migrants, that are not fleeing asylum, that are claiming that they're 15 when they're, 47 years old, or whatever, or criminals, they are not people that the public will not want those people into this country.
What's the answer? Stick warships in the channel, turn the boats back.
Well, I think it's being a lot tougher with the European Union, our European allies. Of course, Macron and Keir Starmer seem to be, best buds at the minute. Of course, they're working very hard to deal with Ukraine, and I think that's absolutely right. But with that comes also the conversation about, by the way, what are you doing?
No more boats.
Because if we're funding France, we need to see results. If we're not seeing results, then there's going to be a problem. But that goes way beyond France, I'm afraid. It goes into Germany, it goes into Italy, it goes all throughout the Mediterranean. So there's a whole...
And Turkey as well.
Turkey, and there's a whole chain of things that need to...
Charlie, I have to go to a break. Thank you for the moment. Just let me ask you the question. How do we fix the illegal migration crisis in this country? 0344. Answers on postcard 0344 499 1000. After the break, I want to talk about the front page of the Mail. Welcome to the UK. This is a gunman who says death to all Jews. Well, that's nice, isn't it? This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Christina in Spain. David. Hola, David. Hola, David. I'm loving your open shirt look. Ah, there's a reason for that. Did you come straight to work from a nightclub with Charlie? You two are excellent together. You both have the gift of making politics interesting and comprehensive. Fab Show answer, yes, we did. No, we didn't, did we?
Straight off the streets.
Yes, straight off the street. Keep all of these messages coming in. This one says Charlie should join Reform. I agree. Let's talk about this story in the Mail. This is the front page. Welcome to the UK. This is nice, very charming. Gunman who says death to all Jews. As his dinghy is picked up in the channel, this is Palestinian Abu Wadi makes a victory sign and declares, "Thank God we've arrived in Britain." Wadi is no innocent fleeing the horrors of Gaza. He is a militant who has called for the slaughter of all Jews and posed menacingly with an AK-47. He is a former member of a group that has terrorised Israel. He has filmed himself chanting about killing Jews, posted a string of pictures depicting running battles with the Israeli Defence Forces, and he is filmed calling for Allah to punish Jews completely. What are we doing? He needs to be picked up, turned round, deported immediately.
Absolutely right. And the story goes on further in page 60. The Home Office last night refused to say whether they were aware of his militant background,
well,
or whether
Mail's aware of it,
or whether he was free to roam the streets. So there we are.
Free to roam the streets?
They don't know whether he is. So the Home Office aren't aware. Kent Police don't know whether any arrest has been made. So we have absolutely no idea, it seems to me, where this chap currently is, and why on earth he's here, and no doubt will be seeking to use the Human Rights Act
without doubt.
if ever he's arrested, to try and get him deported.
So Robert Jenrick has popped up. He says Abu Wadi is clearly a threat to the British people. The police and security services are stretched. As it is, without dangerous men like this, who appear to hold extremist sympathies to deal with, he needs to be deported immediately. Robert Jenrick, should he be the next Conservative leader?
Well, we've got one at the minute.
I mean, she's not going to last, is she? Let's be honest.
Well,
come on, Charlie, she's not going to last.
Kemi's on a mission to renew the party, and
I thought you were going to say downward trajectory.
No. I wouldn't say that. And
so how long has she got?
Well, she's in a very difficult...
More than a week?
Much more than a week.
Month?
She's much more than that.
Right.
2 months. She's in a very difficult position because obviously the party got such a trouncing at the general election, and even though what Kemi is saying a lot of the time is absolutely right when it comes to talking about cultures in this country, when she's talking about divisions in society, she's perfectly placed actually, and I think maybe more than most people, to say, look, actually, as and she doesn't use herself and her qualities to this effect, but she has said, look, she's, as someone that has been an immigrant, as someone that is a black woman, she knows that there are cultures that are more equal than others. She knows that within particular communities people play the system, and actually that there is inequality in this country, and she wants to put it right. And when it comes to the issue, she's saying all the right things that I think that it will be, but the only problem she's got, I mean, not the only problem, but one of the major problems is that the Tories got such a trouncing at the last election. She was part of the previous government. People would just be saying, well, why couldn't have done anything over the last 14 years?
But you see, with policies like that, you can't use the ECHR for immigration. That's a good policy. I think she just needs a bit more oomph. She just needs to sell it a bit more. That's...
Yes, yeah.
I'm going to bill you for that.
Well, I'll pass that on. I'll message her after this. But I just don't think the Tories are getting a look in at the minute because of because there's only one show in town, and that's Reform, because they're so ahead in the polls, and the Labour government. So it's hard to get airtime, I think, if you're a Tory at the minute.
Now, also, we'll go to a break, but after the break, I want to talk about this because it's Commonwealth Day, I believe, tomorrow. The King calls for the Commonwealth unity in uncertain times. It really struck me this morning because the King is very worried about Canada. And that is obviously based on Donald Trump saying, right, he's going to take Canada, Greenland, anything else in North American hemisphere as part of the United States. Hang on a minute. Canada is part of the Commonwealth. The King is head of the Commonwealth, or the figurehead of the Commonwealth, head of the Commonwealth. And so we'll talk more about that. How safe is Canada? This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
could have turned that into something like the entire world was actually wanting to expect Meghan to do the right thing and pull her head out of her, you know what, and make amends. And at least with her father, you know, this would have been a great opportunity, a special guest on the season premiere, and she could sit there and make her dad one of those rainbow fruit hats or whatever the things. I mean, it looked like a clown's hat, but you know, Dad would have enjoyed that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back. Vincent says migrants don't have to cheat the system as they get showered. Would love a ticket to Arsenal. Yeah, I agree, Vincent, thank you. David, what happened to Keith Stalin smashing the gangs? Yet another lie. That's Sean in Gloucester. Keep all of those coming in. Let me just talk about Commonwealth Day, which is tomorrow, which is the annual celebration of the Commonwealth. Third of the world's population, which is extraordinary, actually. The King is said to be very concerned about the discord between Canada and the United States. He says it's very much on his mind. Of course, he met the outgoing Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. We've seen all of these tariffs being levied by the United States, by Trump, onto countries like Canada. And of course, when he called Canada America's 51st state and referred to Trudeau as Governor Trudeau. So the King has a very difficult position here because, of course, he's head of the Commonwealth and at the same time, he's being used as a pawn by Starmer, isn't he, to try and smooth over the coalition of the willing with the United States. So he sits in the middle of that. But at the same time, you can't really say, oh, fine, you can have Canada.
Yes, exactly, yes. And I think they'll have a lot to talk about on the Trump state visit, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I think, there is a suggestion that, I mean, Donald Trump is obviously... Donald Trump's got a lot on his plate at the minute and has involved himself in quite a few things, including that tariff row with Canada and calling him Governor Trudeau. But also, I think there's been a little bit of pushback, I think, or a little bit of souring of the relationship because I think President Trump didn't take too kindly to the King meeting Zelensky.
He did not.
When he was here. But, of course he's going to do that just to show,
But to be fair, he's coming over, isn't he, for an informal sort of gathering at Balmoral where they'll talk about a state visit. And he'll be the only American leader to have two formal state visits.
Exactly.
So, I mean... And also, when we do that stuff, we do it very well.
We do it very well indeed. And, for whatever people think about Donald Trump, he's actually... I would go out on a limb, I'm sure there'll be historians out there that know better than me, to say that he's actually one of the only few presidents that have actually got ties, real ties, to the UK through Scotland, rather than, and his golf courses, but also his mother.
Yeah.
And
he's a massive Anglophile. He loves the United Kingdom.
Exactly. So we should be, thinking about that.
And also, we can use this to our advantage. And actually, and I would say this, wouldn't I? But post-Brexit, we're now in a very interesting position. We're not part of the European Union. We are independent, a sovereign country. We can do deals with countries around the world, like the United States of America, but also we are positioned uniquely because we're now chums again with Europe.
Yeah, exactly, yes, yeah. And this is, I think, we are in the perfect position because, you say, we're outside of those institutions, we're outside of the politics of it, or the political institutions. We can do things as we, as a sovereign nation, want to do, and that is deals with Europe when and solidarity with Europe when time calls, and also have the freedom to avoid tariffs like the EU is going to face.
Yes,
no
so
doubt.
we've been sort of ignored at the moment.
Well, quite, yes, yeah, in a good way. In a good way, absolutely, because we've got that relationship, as you say, with the American presidency and the American government, just as we do with the EU.
And of course, I was reading about Lord Young of Old Windsor, the Queen Elizabeth's last private secretary, just saying this is a very unique ability, the soft power wielded by the monarchy, and it has to be used carefully.
Yes, and this is the thing. I mean, look, this King Charles, is obviously doing things a little bit more differently compared to Her Majesty, and technology and becoming more. He's on the phone now. He's calling. Yeah. They're talking of technology.
I've been told to wind my neck chicken.
Yeah. So, you know, I've lost my train of thought now.
Sorry, the king is doing things differently, you were saying to the late Queen.
Exactly. And so I think he is going to...
You have lost your train of thought.
I have lost my train. It was an incredibly
Anyway, look, whilst you
fascinating
get your
fact.
train of thought back, I'll ring the king and square things over with him. Charlie, thank you for the moment, whilst he's obviously forgotten completely what he was going to say. Right, it is time for a break. After the break, I'll take you through all of this morning's front pages. We'll go through all of the big stories of the day. Don't go anywhere. This is the beginning of the Carolean era, Charlie. Yes, it is.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, Oivamo slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspects in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you, just after 7 o'clock on Sunday, March the 9th. Thanks ever so much for your company. Now, great news, being Sunday, of course. Today is Barbie Day. Yeah, that's why I'm wearing pink. A day celebrating the iconic doll. And if you live near a showcase cinema and you go and see Barbie the movie wearing pink today, you'll get a free ice cream.
Hiya, Bobby.
Hi, Ken.
You want to go for a ride?
Sure, Ken.
Jump in.
There you go. I thought it was a dreadful film, actually. Also, today it's National Dishwasher Appreciation Day. Of course it is. Who comes up with these? It's a day that recognises the convenience that this appliance brings to our lives. It was invented, or the idea was brought up by Josephine Garris Cochrane. She came up with the idea of using water pressure to clean the dishes, and so created the concept that we still use today. Oh, there we are. We've turned it on now. Also, today is National Meatballs Day. That's right. It's a hearty homage to the meat dish in all its glory, from traditional recipes to those encouraging a fusion of unique flavours.
On top of spaghetti, all covered with cheese.
There we are, meatballs in all their glory.
I lost my poor meatball when somebody sneezed.
Very good. All I can say to you, Dave, is albondigas. That's Spanish for meatball. Time for this hour's Fascinating Facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
So, some new ones for you this hour. On this day in 1925, the start of Pink's War, an air-to-ground bombardment carried out by the Royal Air Force under the command of Wing Commander Richard Charles Montague Pink against the tribesmen in northwest Pakistan. It was the first Royal Air Force operation conducted independently of the British Army and the Royal Navy. On this day in 1946, 33 fans were killed and hundreds injured when a barrier collapsed at the Bolton Wanderers football ground. The dead and injured were taken from the stand, with those who had perished laying along the touchline and covered in coats. Incredibly, a little under half an hour after leaving the pitch, the game was restarted with a new sawdust-lined touchline separating the players from the bodies. It was the deadliest football stadium-related disaster in British history until the Ibrox Park disaster in 1971. And on this day in 1973, Northern Ireland voted in favour 90-1 of staying in the United Kingdom. And those are this hour's Fascinating Facts.
Oh, it's the weekend, let's celebrate. With David and Johnny, it's never too late. Laughing and talking, we're having
Well, it's a bit heavy metal for this time of the morning. 5 minutes past 7, Sunday, March the 9th. Charlie Rowley joins me this morning. Lovely to see you.
Good morning. Lovely to be here. Thank you very much.
Well, just before we go back to talk about reform and the infighting that's going on, and by the way, it is all over the papers this morning, wherever you look. It doesn't really matter which paper you look in. It is pretty much everywhere. I just want to take a little moment, if I may, just to wish my sister, my baby sister, a happy 50th birthday for tomorrow. Here she is on the left. So we call each other twin, actually, Charlie, because we're very, very similar. She's obviously far more glamorous than I am. But it's really weird. We are separated by 6 years, and yet I know what she's thinking and she knows what I'm thinking.
Good God.
It's a really weird bond, and there's my brother on the left of the picture at the moment, as you can see at the moment, my mum as well. And so can you believe, when you've got a sister, a younger sister who's 50, that means I'm very old.
Well, you said 6 years apart. 50.
Yeah, so I'm 56 this year.
I wouldn't put you a day over 55. I wouldn't. I wouldn't. Not.
That was taken some considerable time ago there. There's Cameron, my nephew, and there's my sister with her eldest daughter, Evie.
Oh, well, happy birthday to you.
Yes, happy birthday, Katie. And we are celebrating tomorrow, but I haven't been able to talk to my sister because I'm rubbish at secrets, and so I'm just deeply worried I'm going to tell her what we're going to do.
Is she not listening in?
No, but she doesn't know. She knows we're doing something.
Oh, right, okay.
But she doesn't know what we're doing.
Okay.
So this is
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, Katie, and obviously looking forward to seeing you and the rest of the family tomorrow. Let's talk about reform. We have been talking about it this morning. Look, the story has moved on. Overnight, I spoke to various key people within the party. Nigel Farage has warned that Reform UK's hopes of electoral success will be damaged if it descends into further infighting over the expulsion of one of its MPs. This is Rupert Lowe. I mean, it just goes on and on. It's all over the Telegraph this morning. Rupert Lowe says, and just in terms of that chronology, my understanding is there were complaints made against Rupert Lowe, there was an internal investigation launched, the KC was then appointed but without any public statement. Then Rupert went on the offensive, did the article with the Mail. That is when the party then made it public what they were doing, and obviously 4 million votes, 5 members of Parliament. Rupert now has issued a statement saying, let me be abundantly clear. He says, I'm the victim of a witch hunt. There is no credible evidence against me. None has been provided. Reform has removed me from the party before any investigation has started. They have conflated the complaints to insinuate I'm guilty. I will not tolerate these falsehoods, and discussions have already taken place with my legal team. He says, is it a surprise the allegations were made public the day after I made reasonable criticisms of Nigel Farage and the Reform leadership? He says that actually there's no communication here. There were 5 MPs. We could have got in a black cab together. And Lee Anderson, the chief whip, has said Reform cannot go on with Rupert Lowe as an MP. The point I tried to make earlier was, yes, it's really unedifying, this. They really should have dealt with this in public. It doesn't need to be aired in private. It doesn't need to be aired all over the newspapers. And of course, all that does is it upsets people who've put their faith in reform and the change in political system. And many people have said, look, they believe reform was the answer to this two-party system where we have seen infighting and, you know, dog fights and the unedifying spectacle of the Tory leadership contest where the members chose one person and then the party didn't like that, and out they went, and all the rest of it. And so this situation is serious, but is it the end of reform?
No. It's not the end of reform because, you know, a week is a long time in politics, and, you know, but it just depends how long you want that week to be. It could be 2 weeks if the story rumbles on, and if, as you say, it continues to be aired in public, then that's when it becomes a little bit problematic. And then, of course, because of the egos, if it becomes more personal, if it becomes more targeted in a sort of, you know, some sort of, you know, Machiavellian sort of way, then, of course, it's a real turn-off to ordinary voters who just care about the big issues of the day, like solving the immigration crisis, like cutting taxes, like cutting regulation, like getting rid of all the waste to make sure that we've got money to go be redistributed, or there's more pounds in people's pockets, particularly in the north or the Red Wall, where people for far too long have felt that they've been left behind, and that's where a lot of the support is coming into reform from those particular areas. It's not just disaffected sort of Tories, but all of that tension is out there now because there's been this bust-up that's been so public, and people are, as exactly you say, they're thinking, well, this isn't really what I came into reform for, because I wanted a hopeful, optimistic party that was doing things differently. That was the appeal. Maybe that shine has now been sort of taken off.
I mean, the point I made earlier was that both Nigel and Rupert are very successful individuals. They've had previous lives, and actually I would suggest that Nigel is the most influential politician I have ever met. He has changed British history, the course of British history. I also made the point that without Nigel, Rupert wouldn't have been a European MEP, neither would I, because the reason we were both there is Nigel picked up the phone and asked us to stand, which we did. And Rupert seems to have forgotten that, but equally, Rupert then cannot go on the record and say Nigel is acting as a messiah and the governance and corporate structure of the party needs to change. Now, whilst I agree with that, and of course the party is learning that the members need to have more say over the way that party is run. But remember, this party was set up from nothing, and it hasn't had this exponential rise. And with that, and even if it was, say, a private company, if a company grows that quickly, you are always going to have problems where you are chasing a massive boulder down a hill.
Yeah, absolutely, and there'll be teething problems, but that is, for me, in a funny way, that is a slow process that needs to take place. I'm sure if you're a member of, you know, of Reform, if you're a member of, you want to have a say, but if it's a new startup, you know, you want to make sure before you sort of start then democratising, but also when you
I suppose levelling the structure more than anything, or making it.
Yes, yeah. When you devolve power, that's what I'm trying to do to branches and things. You've got to have those branches set up, and
which is what has just
is what it just has happened. But you've also got to make sure that the people that are running those branches have been vetted, properly vetted,
which is also happening.
Which is also. But all of these things have to happen from a centre point of view, from a central set. So this will happen over time. You can't just suddenly turn up and think, right now I need to democratise everything.
Well, it's interesting looking at the Conservative Party. One of the problems they ran into was David Cameron, just mentioning him again, because what he did, if you remember, the branches had great autonomy over the choice of candidates. David Cameron comes in and says to all the constituencies, you can't choose your own candidates. The constituency chairman didn't like it, neither did the voters in those local constituencies. So you have to learn lessons from parties like the Conservative Party, the oldest political party in the world.
Exactly, but it's much easier to sort of, you know, give power away in the first instance rather than take it back. So, you know, I'm sure if you're, you know, if you're a branch chairman of Reform, of course you might have 2 or 3 people that you think, oh, they could actually be a very good parliamentary candidate, or they could be a council candidate. That's fine, and so you can recommend those people, let them go through the vetting process. But if there is any issue, because ultimately these things are there for a reason. They're there to protect the party, and they're there to protect what could be a front page story if you get some sort of, and I'm not, this is outside of Reform, because, you know, there are people in all political parties that just turn out to be absolute crackpots that have got, you know, extreme views, or that have said something, or there's some social media history that happens in every party that could be dragged up again. So, you know, you've got to have a vetting process. You've got to do things differently. But just going back to the central point is that Nigel Farage is the reason why Reform have been so successful. I think, you know, it is not ideal to have this spat in public. However, we've seen it in the US where people, before Trump became the Republican nominee again, even for the second time, there were people that were falling all over themselves to criticise Trump, that now obviously backed him, that now, funny enough, have ended up in his cabinet. So it's not the end of the world. It's not ideal. It's a test for reform. It's a test for Nigel, I think, now, who I hope will want to... I know he's got a piece in the Telegraph, but at some stage he'll have to talk and face the cameras, and I think what he will do is try to just rise above it and say, look, there's obviously a bit of an issue that people might have read about over the weekend. You know, play it down a little bit, maybe make light of it, but to say what we can't make light of are allegations when they take place. An investigation has to take place. That will conclude. I can't say any more about that at the minute, but here's what Rupert and I do agree on, which is dealing with immigration, which is tackling waste in the civil service, and that's what everybody that was part of reform thinks. That's what we're going to do. That's why we're continuing to grow. That's why we're heading the polls. That's why we've got a huge conference, I think you've got in March, isn't it? End of this month. You know, so there'll be a moment there to
which I will be at.
Well,
in fact, I'm hosting it.
Are you?
Yes,
well, there you go. So, you know, that'll be another moment that's fixed in the diary that people will be looking to. These things come and go, but I think the way in which it can go a lot quicker is if everybody takes everything offline, just, you know, get behind the scenes, get an investigation sorted, get it concluded maybe quite quickly, and then see how things can move on.
You make a brilliant point, and in fact Nigel has been very quiet, and I think he is sitting there considering, having a considered response. I think is absolutely the key to this. Deborah in Essex, good morning to you. Deborah says, good morning David and Charlie. I do love Charlie. He's so demure and intelligent. What, this, Charlie? I know this might be difficult. I know this might be difficult for you to read, but here goes. I understand everyone's frustrations. However, Tory and Labour have shown they're not what we want or we need. I don't know if reform will be any better because we haven't seen them in power, but I, for one, am prepared to give them a chance to prove themselves, whether they succeed or not. So we have to try. Every party has disagreements, some behind closed doors, some in the public domain. It's a fact of life. Let's get on with the job in hand and promote reform. Do not let this ruin what has been built so far. We have a long way to go, and May the 1st is the starting point. Let's do this.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, a pretty bang on the money, because I think, you know, people aren't just suddenly going to, even though there might be this sharp intake of breath, this gasp to say, oh, you know, something that was actually a very well-oiled machine and where it seemed to be a party that was unstoppable. There's clearly been a rift there, so, you know, a bit of a break there. But people aren't necessarily running back to the Tories to think, oh, right, they're all just the same, so I'll go back to voting Tory, or, oh, right, I'll just, you know, be a Labour voter again. People don't think like that. So they're watching reform, they're waiting to see how this is going to be handled, and it'll be a test in the run-up to May's elections, and we'll see what the results are.
For any small party to field 1,500 candidates for the locals and the mayoral elections is no mean feat.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming from, you know, as you say,
from nothing,
a very, very low base. But just finally, to you, because you mentioned about Nigel, and I think you're absolutely right. If he's taking a considered view, because his appeal is that he is also outspoken and very direct and very charismatic and actually a very, very good communicator, and he has that sort of Donald Trump-like quality.
He does.
He has that Boris Johnson-like quality.
He does.
You know, they are very good communicators and able to coin a phrase that inspires people, that articulates what real people out there are thinking about outside of the Westminster bubble. So he has a choice whether you go down the Donald Trumpian route, which is doubling down, which is being very tough on people, which is saying no, because this is the cause, this is the way forward, this is what people signed up to. He is the leader. Nobody would be in Parliament if it wasn't for him. So he has that. But it can become... But we've got to remember, we are in the UK where we still like we like fair play, and we like a bit of diplomacy, and we still like, you know, that polite British stiff upper lip sort of approach. So when he attacked Kemi, for example, and I think he said he was going to threaten to sue Kemi when she sort of made gaffe, and it was a gaffe, about the
membership numbers.
He didn't necessarily need to do that, and he later retreated and said, look, I'm not going to waste time sort of engaging. And that was... So he has a tendency to... Good, and that's the thing.
I do think he's learning, because I think also he's now in an unparalleled position. He's never been in Parliament before. None of them have.
Exactly.
So they're learning along the way, and he's realised that actually he needs to be more statesmanlike. And when we were in the European Parliament, his appeal was the fact that he could chuck mud at walls and throw stuff around that Parliament building and accuse all the Europeans of being insane. That was his appeal. You don't have the same appeal if you do that in a domestic Parliament.
Exactly, and it's now the balance. That is the political tightrope that he now has to walk, because he's positioned himself as the real opposition. So you've got to throw that mud still where you can at the government and at other parties, but you've got to maintain that approach of being, as you say, the statesman who could become the next Prime Minister. You know, that's his view, if that's what he thinks.
Do you think he will be?
Well, I can see a path, but I could see a path to the Tories winning the last election. So, but I can see a situation whereby if Labour continue to tank in the polls, I think they've had a bit of a bounce. I think the Labour Party will have a bit of a bounce because of the way in which they've handled Ukraine, which hasn't been bad.
Yep.
It's been Keir Starmer's sort of found a niche there that he can, but. People will vote domestically on elections. They'll vote when it comes to immigration, when it comes to taxes, when it comes to the health service. The reason why I'm hesitating is because I think actually what will happen, unless there is a deal or some sort of conversation between the Tories and Reform...
No deal. It's not happening.
Well, a deal is
it's
maybe...
It's not happening.
Depending on where the polls are in the run-up to the next general election, depending on who has the momentum, I don't think you could forgive the Tory party if it stands in the way of Reform winning seats, which then lets Labour in through the back door. I think that would be...
Do you not remember the supply agreement that was reached between Reform and the Conservatives at the last election, which then the Tories completely ignored?
Well, I
remember that.
I absolutely do, but I think that's...
Because I was in the middle of it.
Well, but that's why I don't think you would forgive the Tories if they stood. So I think Nigel has the upper hand.
Right.
So I think it would be a conversation, if not a deal. You find a different word for it. But I think there will have to be, whether it's just two sides that actually understanding that, look, if the Tories can't actually win the seats in the Red Wall, or if they're not going to come nowhere, but it will take away, then I think it would be better, if they haven't got the money, by the sounds of things that the Tory party offers, then it might just be better not to field a candidate there. And similarly, there might be, if Reform don't manage to have 600 odd candidates vetted, and that could be, there might be the odd place where if there's a Tory Lib Dem split, or if it's a runoff between the Tories and Lib Dems and Reform would only split the Tory vote, it might be ideal for Reform, because then you may end up, to conclude, with some sort of coalition or supply and demand agreement with Reform and the Tories. But if Reform get the number of seats that's suggested in the polls with the Tories backing them, then Nigel would be Prime Minister.
This is a very pithy message. Charlie, stop bubbling. Join Reform. Kemi will drown you. And Spencer from Somerset. Charlie, you need to join Reform. I joined when the numbers were 20,000. I love talk, and they speak so much common sense, all of the presenters. Keep all of those messages coming in. We'll go to a break. After the break, I want to talk about this. London's no-go neighbourhoods. There's a map of nearly 5,000 districts in London, streets with the highest rates of violent crimes, with thefts, with drug offences. Also, Labour, and if you are living in a village, wait for this, Labour is going to scrap protections for villages to ramp up house building in the country. And Keir Starmer is trying to have an EU reset, which risks a £1 billion blow to British farmers. This is Weekend Breakfast.
She could have turned that into something like the entire world was wanting to expect Meghan to do the right thing and pull her head over, you know what, and make amends. And at least with her, this
on DA on your smart.
Welcome back. This is Talk 7:25. The lovely Charlie Rowley joins me this morning, who's defecting to Reform UK. Good morning, David. Great show. This is Michelle in Altrincham. Good morning, Michelle, one of our regulars. I love Charlie Rowley.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. He speaks sense and has a very calming influence on political issues. Reform could do with someone like him. I'll continue to support and vote for Reform. Nigel isn't standing for any nonsense. If something isn't working, you're out. It's a short, sharp shock system. It's probably the best way to diffuse the infighting. It's done. It's dusted. We need to get on with the job in hand. Onwards and upwards. Let's stay positive. Michelle, thank you for your message. Farage is a calculated politician, this is Keller, and he cannot rise above this time. His pattern of falling out with all talented people who outshine him finishes my support on him and Reform. Elon Musk is right. He is not a strong leader. He is a very good campaigner. What do you think about that? There's an element of truth in that. He's a brilliant politician. He is a maverick. He's a fighter. I think he's learning to be a manager, actually.
Yeah.
And they're very different skills.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the key. The skill set to be a campaigner. You can obviously go out there and lead a battalion, beat the drum, champion your causes, because you can tap into quite easily what the view of people are if you genuinely believe it. And I think Nigel does. That's why he's a great communicator. If I can get my words out. Like Boris as well, there's an antennae there that they recognise, whether it's the farmers, for example, the farmers that are being taxed to the hilt through their inheritance tax, whether it's about working people, getting people off benefits and into work, whether it's about the unfairness of people coming into this country illegally and getting it all the handouts that are going over and above British people that have worked in the armed forces. The idea that we still have people that have served in this country, put their lives on the line, and who are homeless.
I think it's appalling.
They're not in hotels, are they?
They should be.
And they absolutely should be. But why have we not been able to do that? That is, crazy.
It's a lack of political will.
Lack of political will. So having that antennae and to be able to campaign on those issues and get them changed is one thing. But you're right. When you're having to then deal with internal party matters, other personalities, the HR side of things as a leader,
and look, I mean, I'd say this to his face. He's not very good at that stuff because that's not his thing. He's very good at policy and top line thinking, and what drives him, and he understands the issues that face the country. I don't think he's not. That's why Zia was brought in, because the idea was that Zia is then to make the branches, the structures, all that stuff that is very important. I mean, one of the biggest things here and Nigel, weirdly actually, it was Nigel who was the first person to talk about illegal immigration into this country, if you remember. He was there in Dover, he showed those boats coming over, we all thought he was nuts, and he was right. And now we've seen all of these people coming in. Actually, let's take a call on this particular issue. Barry is in Norwich. Good morning, Barry.
Good morning, David.
How are you?
I'm not too bad.
How's Norwich? Sunny?
Oh, well, sunny, a bit chilly.
Oh.
Yeah. Blue sky. Nice.
Right, so your point this morning.
Yeah, I was just listening to Charlie earlier on talking about Rwanda. I think what we need to do in this country regarding illegal immigration is stop the pull factors, stop putting them up hotels, stop giving them money every week, stop giving them new clothes, stop giving them SIM cards and phones.
60 gig.
Stop it.
60 gig they need, apparently, on their SIM card.
Yeah. what is that all about?
I have no
I go
idea.
to work. I go to work most mornings, and I see people who are born in this country, fought for this country, and they're all in doorways and on the streets. And I'm like, why can't we house our citizens first?
So
I don't understand.
I was just looking at the numbers. 25,000 illegal migrants since Starmer came to power. 25,000.
It's at the end of the day, it's a choice. I mean, the last Conservative government were the same. It's a choice. Letting illegal immigrants into the country is a choice.
What's the answer? What would you do?
Turn them round.
Barry, what would you do if you are Prime Minister? What would you do?
Turn them round.
So how would that work? So you're turning. Who's turning them round? How's that work?
Well, I'd get the Navy out there, or to turn them back. They're not coming from a war. This country is really small on the grand scheme of things, and areas like where I live in Norwich, the whole demographic of the area has changed.
I've seen it.
And it's just.
I mentioned this before, and you probably would understand this, Barry. I was in Ipswich recently, and I couldn't believe the change in the demographic.
It's crazy. I mean, where I live, you walk down one of the main streets in Norwich, and you're lucky to hear the English language. And I'm not being racist or anything like that. It's a fact. And there's people now who wouldn't have said things like 5 or so years ago, who say it quite openly. We have people marching through the streets for Palestine. Ramadan being held in, where was that?
In Windsor, in the Great Hall.
Windsor. Come on. Yeah,
Can I just ask you about this row between Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe? Go on.
I'm very disappointed, to be frank. Yeah, right.
In whom?
Both of them for airing it in public. Yeah, right. I voted Reform. I like Reform. I hope Reform do the business, and I want the party to get rid of all the garbage now and just get on with the job. Yeah.
I mean, to be fair to Rupert Lowe, he has been a very good Member of Parliament, I think. He has supported his constituents. He has also done a lot of deep digging. He was the one that found out we still have 218 hotels still active for asylum seekers. He was the one that found out that the government intends to use them for the next 4 years.
I think what you had, I like Rupert, I like all the Reform MPs, I like Nigel, right, but I think what you got with Rupert and Nigel is two very, very big egos. And, I'm
not saying anything.
No, and I just think the pair of them need to go smack round the head, the pair of them, do you know what I mean? Yeah, right, on the naughty step, yeah?
Naughty step, I'll tell them both.
Just get on with it, do you know what I mean? And just start leading again, and start being the part, because they're going to go places, Reform, yeah?
Is it the end of Reform, or is this the beginning of a new era for Reform?
I think sometimes new parties, like new businesses and that sort of, they have hiccups, don't they? Things happen. It's the evolution of the party, But I'm glad it's not happening like a year before the next general election or 6 months.
I mean, I think the timing is unfortunate given the local elections, the mayoral elections, 1,500 candidates being fielded. I think that is unfortunate.
Well, we ain't got any here.
Is that right? I should look into that. Really good to talk to you, Barry. Always good to talk to you. Let's take a voice note now from Anna in Surrey. Good morning, Anna.
Morning, guys. Anna, Surrey. I think you've got this situation topsy-turvy. We're not voting for Reform because Nigel tells us how to think. We're voting for Reform because they're doing what we ask them to do, unlike the Tories. Just snapping your fingers and thinking we're coming back for a few promises. It's not happening, guys. You're done. You're over. That's the Tories finished. Line drawn. Labour not only don't do what we want them to do, they imprison us for it. So try to think of it the other way round. Nigel and Rupert having a lover's tiff, it's irrelevant. As long as they are doing what the British public have voted for them to do. It's not about them. It's about us. So maybe that's where the mainstream parties are getting it wrong. They're misunderstanding the dynamics. You work for us, not vice versa. Cheers, guys.
Good, strong point. David, I like Charlie, but I'm afraid he's wide of the mark with his opinion on what reform voters think. I voted for a reform because Farage came back in, so he was nothing to do with my vote. My vote was inspired by my hate of Labour and my distrust of the ruinous so-called Conservatives. If reform doesn't reform by getting rid of Youssef, I'll be following Rupert or finding another party who wants to repair my country. Thoughts?
Yeah, well, you've got somebody there that's supported reform and isn't maybe looking elsewhere. But again, it's another personality. So whether it's Zia, whether it's Rupert, whether it's Nigel, we're talking about the individuals. Whereas actually that last voice note, which I think and the lady from Surrey is absolutely right. It's about Anna. It's about the issues that people care about. And so why are people going to reform? Why are people looking at reform? It's because of the disaffection between those other parties, those mainstream parties that have got it wrong, and reform tapped into what the public really care about, like those small boats or like immigration or like tax cuts and all the rest of it. So stick with the issues, and I think maybe there needs to be maybe a little bit of a conversation at the top of reform to say, right, okay, let's have who's going to be doing the media? Should Zia be doing any more media now if he's the chairman? Does he need to take a bit of a step back just to get out of the limelight?
I was surprised to see him on Question Time. Zia.
Was he on Question Time? I've stopped watching Question Time a long time ago because it's not quite what it was. No. Exactly. It's it's fair play to anyone that does it because you're not going to get a word in or inspire anybody.
I just think it's absolutely hideous. I haven't done it. I have been asked to do it. I haven't done it yet. Just two quick messages here before we go to the break. David, this is Kevin. I'm a Reform member and Nigel supporter, but he's been spreading himself too thin with the other news channels and being an MP and trips to America. He looks tired of late. That's Kevin in Southampton. And hi, David. Rupert was supposed to have been the Farage's JD Vance. Both need a kick up the backside for acting like children. That's Tash in Sussex. Thank you for that. I promise that after the break, I will go through this morning's front pages, which we still haven't done. And I still want to talk about all of these other stories, including London Council's paying £140 million of property to move homeless people out of London into rural areas of the country. And also there's another brilliant story about how shirkers are using sneaky ways to avoid going back into the office because they don't want to play. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Weekend Breakfast, 7:38, Sunday, March the 9th. Charlie Rowley joins me this morning before he defects to Reform. Let's take you through the front pages this morning. The Sunday Telegraph, we've talked a great deal about this. Farage, Reform infighting will only hurt us at the ballot box. There's an interesting story here, and we spoke about this yesterday. The Russian spies plot to control the flow of migrants. A Russian spy master plotted to use private armies to control migration into Europe. This is Jan Marsalek, the fugitive boss of the disgraced tech company Wirecard, planned to create a 15,000-strong band of mercenaries to control the border and the key migration route through Libya. There's a lot in here about Putin, about weaponising migration, because that's one of the Achilles heels of the European Union, as we know, and, of course, countries like ourselves outside the European Union. Also, the other story that we spoke very quickly about, the King calls for Commonwealth unity in uncertain times, Commonwealth Day being tomorrow. Sunday Express. 6.6 billion cost of asylum seeker support revealed. Yes, taxpayers shelled out 6.6 billion on asylum seeker and refugee support schemes. Wait for this. Yes, this isn't just to look after them. This is also for trips to the zoo and tennis lessons and sandwich deliveries and friendship services. Also a trip to Arsenal Stadium, which I think many people would like. This was racked up by 200 government and local council funded schemes over the past 5 years. The Mail. This is an unbelievable story. This is about a chap called Abdu Wadi. He was picked up on Thursday by UK Border Force. He made a victory sign and declared, "Thank God we've arrived in Britain." But he's not an innocent man here fleeing the horrors of Gaza at all. He is a militant. He has called for the slaughter of all Jews. He's posed with AK-47s. He's part of a group that terrorised Israel. He's filmed himself chanting about killing Jews. He's posted a string of pictures depicting running battles with the IDF. He also says Allah should punish Jews completely. I tell you what, he needs to be turned around and deported immediately. Front page of the Sunday Times. Pro-Palestine activists target defence firms. Defence companies supplying weapons for the British military are being attacked and sabotaged by pro-Palestinian activists, according to a Sunday Times investigation. A group, Palestine Action, has claimed responsibility for 356 direct actions since 2020. They've caused millions of pounds worth of damage to defence and engineering firms, banks, estate agents, insurance, property companies, accountancy firms, university and local government buildings. The other story here is King fear over Canada and US. We spoke about this. Donald Trump wanting Canada to be the 51st state of the United States. Hang on a minute. It's part of the Commonwealth. The King is head of the Commonwealth. He's been deployed as that soft power by Keir Starmer. So the King is in an interesting position here. Apparently the BBC wants to hire more Northerners. Yeah. Anyway, the Observer front page. I don't know what to say.
No. Well, I mean, what's the...
Well, they've already moved everything up north anyway to Salford, haven't they?
Yes, yeah. Well, maybe they should focus on actually vetting people that take part in their documentaries.
What a great idea.
Rather than you still tick-boxing exercises.
The other thing that I always think is those, things like breakfast which come out of Salford, they don't get politicians there, do they? Because where are they? They're in London.
London, yes. Yeah,
so why is it in Salford?
Yeah, I don't know. And it's, you can save millions, I suppose, when it goes into the BBC and, save the...
Do you know, I went to Television Centre, where I used to work, and it's so sad because, of course, I have such happy memories of being there and all the shows that I used to do in Television Centre, and, of course, the BBC flogged it and it's become luxury apartments, and, and now ITV is in there. The Observer. Britain's amongst the hardest hit by COVID fallout 5 years on. Britain performed worse than most other developed nations in its response to the COVID pandemic. Quelle surprise. This is 5 years on from the first lockdown. We spent more money than most other countries on economic help, yet ended up with larger drops in life expectancy, more people too sick to work, huge levels of homelessness, soaring mental health problems amongst young people. Honestly, what we did to people and the mask wearing and what we did to the intellectual and emotional development of children, I think, is absolutely appalling. The Sunday Mirror this morning, Labour's war on yobs. I've heard it all before. Yobs face being banned from town centres. Don't we already have that? And jail for 2 years under a new law being voted on by MPs this week. Sunday People, sex sells. This is really shocking. 40 women have been fired from their prison jobs for having sex with inmates in 4 years. The total acts for jailbird flings has trebled.
I love the fact there's a term for it. Jailbird flings. Well, there you go. I didn't know. I mean,
there's so many questions I have about this.
So many questions. But I knew there was...
Katie Evans, 26, she was banged up for an affair after an affair with a burglar.
Wow. Well, there you go.
Another was jailed... Oh, look, I can't turn the pages fast enough. When a film of her romp was posted online.
Well, there was the was it Wandsworth Prison? There was we've had the court case of that particular prison officer. She got sort of done for time for, obviously, there was the film of her relationship with an inmate. But it's extraordinary, really. I mean, what do people do? I mean, I've heard of an office romance, but this is not, going into an office, is it?
I don't know what to say.
It's beggars belief.
Well, it does. The Sun, on Sunday, Liam, love child drama. Oasis frontman Liam Gallagher is embroiled in a new legal battle with the mother of his love child, don't care. The Daily Star, let's all have a cheeky peek at Uranus. Spaced out Brits are going goggle-eyed for telescopes. They're buying more telescopes than ever thanks to the soaring interest in the heavens and alien life. Have you got a telescope?
I don't. There's no, I don't. I think I've seen one across the street, though.
Have you?
Yes. Peeping through my net curtains.
I've
on a
seen
morning.
that in London. And the little curtains open slightly with the telescope.
Yes, they'll need one.
Stop it, it's 7:45. The time is 7:45. This is Weekend Breakfast. After the break, I will talk about this. London's no-go neighbourhoods. Labour are scrapping protection for villages so Angela Rayner can build a house right next to yours. London councils are buying £140 million of property to move the homeless out of the city because that solves the problem, not. And Starmer wants to have an EU reset, or a reset with the EU, and that could be £1 billion blow to farmers because they're not having life isn't difficult enough for the farmers. We'll talk more about all of that after this break.
Well, I mean, this story is really, it's the kind of stuff that you can make movies out of. It's not just these guys, but if you remember, there was this big story about Wirecard. Wirecard was a huge German fraud. It was like a Ponzi scheme, looking like a fintech company. The guy in charge of it was this German wunderkind until he fled. When the police went after him, he fled to Russia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome Welcome back. This is Talk 7:48, Sunday, March the 9th. Charlie Rowley joins me this morning. Let me tell you about this. This is in the Daily Mail. This is about London. I see Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, and I think you need to get a grip of this capital because it is falling apart in front of my very eyes. London's most crime-infested neighbourhoods can today be exposed. Damning figures show thefts, assaults, drug offences have hit all-time highs under Sadiq Khan's watch. Leicester Square, Covent Garden and surrounding tourist-laden area is the hotspot for violent and sex crime. 1,302 attacks, rapes, sexual assaults in Westminster. It is tiny Westminster. It equates to 1,645 violent crimes per 100 acres. That's the highest across the capital. This is in the same neighbourhood. You've also got drug-related crimes, possession of cannabis, also 6,150 thefts recorded. One of the biggest thefts you see is these little scooters. You know, people playing with their mobile phones. The scooter whizzes along, takes it out of your hand and sells it for parts.
Oh, absolutely, and people on e-bikes where you can't hear the bike approach necessarily, and it's, you know, there are clips no end of people having their mobile swiped from them. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it might be a surprise to you and your viewers and listeners that I occasionally like a little a tipple in the Leicester Square, Covent Garden, Soho area.
Do you? Really? That does surprise me.
And on occasion, on a sort of, you know, even on midweek, you know, because weekends I'm usually either here or else. And you cannot see a police officer for love nor money. And the amount of people that you have to walk by, of people in hooded tops, people that are gangs, they are so blatant and brazen now that they hang around outside the bar. And the security of bars and clubs, they can't do anything about it because it's not their, you know, it's not their role. And there's obviously looking after the people that's inside and people that are coming in. But they hang around outside, just waiting for you to literally leave the venue before you're surrounded or targeted. And I see it so often, people that are clearly, I know you have had far too many or have far too much to drink, who are literally just being preyed upon and targeted. And you see, and no one can intervene. No one can do anything about it. You don't see them at all.
And also, Sadiq Khan spends his whole time talking about ULEZ and the fact that the air quality in outer London is improving. Actually, get a grip of the crime in the capital.
Exactly. And his tenure, I'm afraid, he might have been knighted. So you know, that'll be hopefully him in.
Knighted for what?
Knighted for what?
Because services for running down London.
Crime is up. Housing is appalling, not being built. Transport's in complete disruption. It's ridiculous.
Talking of housing, of course, the Labour government wants to build 1.5 million homes over 5 years. Ooh, same target as the Tories, which they failed to do. Wait for this. If you live in a village, you will not like this. Villages in the Greenbelt are being stripped of protections against excessive development under Angela Rayner's house building drive. So the plans have been published. They're going to remove the block on unrestricted sprawl. Now, I don't mind building on grey belt land. I think that's probably the right thing to do. But essentially, villages are no longer going to be designated as historic, which gives you extra safeguards. So they're going to allow these villages to be built on. I live in the country. These villages have no infrastructure at the best of times. They're building on floodplains. So what happens, of course, they all get flooded anyway. There are no supermarkets. There is no infrastructure. You can't actually move. I don't think any of this lot have ever been to the country.
No, by the sounds of things, they probably haven't. And I think there needs to be a whole rewiring of the planning system. So we need to actually reclassify what people think is sometimes green belt, or something that looks green and pleasant, that should be protected. But there is an awful lot of green belt land that is actually hugely derelict, might be old farming or whatever. That can be redeveloped. We can have whole new towns and cities if we wanted to, because if you're going to build more homes, you need, exactly as you said, the infrastructure, the GP practices, the supermarkets, the police station, the schools, the transport. And you're not going to get that if you're just blowing up the size of a village where there isn't that infrastructure in the first place. It is only going to end badly.
But you see, this morning when the car came, I went through parts of East London that are derelict. There are huge warehouses that are derelict that really would be prime sites for development.
Exactly.
And they're right next to DLR stations, so you can get into town and all the rest of it. But they just don't do it, and I don't understand why. Let's talk about the farmers, because the farmers are having a pretty terrible time. Wait for this. Keir Starmer obviously wants to cosy up with the European Union. So he wants to essentially have regulatory alignment with the European Union. So that means that he wants to ease checks on goods coming from Europe and Britain to the European Union and vice versa. But he thinks the way to do this is actually to cosy up to Europe. Now, what that means is that we would no longer be allowed to do things that we are currently doing post-Brexit. One of those things is gene editing of fruit and vegetables. This is a burgeoning industry. It's a new industry. It's £1 billion worth a year to the economy here in the UK. We're the only country that can do this because of Brexit. And he wants to get rid of it.
And that is, shouldn't be up for negotiation, really, because that is the whole point of Brexit, for us to be able to do things differently, us to do things on our own, us to become, obviously, the most successful economy in Europe and G7. I think we're on our way. But that's not because of governments. That's usually because of entrepreneurs and people, the hard-working people of this country. But you're absolutely right. The EU have seen an opportunity because they think he'll give away all the freedoms that we've just taken back, and that'll be a bad thing for the United Kingdom.
London councils and housing companies they own have spent more than £140 million buying up homes to relocate homeless people out of the city. More than a dozen councils in the capital have spent millions buying up 850 properties in towns and cities across England. So essentially their idea is to deal with the homeless crisis, that they're not actually going to house people in the city in those empty warehouses that I've just talked about in East London. They're shipping them out to the country. And as a result, the country can't cope with the homeless that they have in those local areas. So they're shipping them out further to other neighbouring counties.
This is just passing the buck and passing people around, but it's not solving the problem. There is a reason why people become homeless, and sometimes they need wraparound care, whether it's mental health, whether it's drug and alcohol abuse, whatever it is, family breakdown, whatever. But those people, some people need absolutely targeted support, some people need temporary, doesn't need to be permanent, some people need longer-term accommodation. But, it would help if we'd started to help those people first before allowing however many migrants that come into the country and just giving them a 5-star Rolls-Royce service Central London hotel.
And 60 gigabytes of a SIM card.
Yes.
Redbridge Council has spent more than £10 million buying 55 properties outside the capital. Some in Coventry and Leicester, because that's really near Redbridge. Many of the homes have been bought. Let me just tell you about this. 84 of the London homes are in Basildon. Basildon is not in London, it's in Essex. Nearly 700 households living in emergency accommodation. As you say, all they're doing is outsourcing the problem. This is quite interesting because COVID, obviously people worked at home, and lots of the young people quite like working at home because they can do the washing and then not actually get dressed and all the rest of it, and do your Zoom in your pants and all that kind of stuff. And so the companies have said, hang on a minute, we want you back in the office. Well, I didn't know this. So many of these companies are saying you need to come back into the office. But what they're doing is so the employees have to go in and, you have a swipey thing to get through the gates and everything. They're doing something called coffee badging. Have you heard of this?
No, I haven't.
Oh,
no.
So you swipe in, you go for coffee, so you're seen, you log your computer in to the Wi-Fi so that because they can monitor whether you're online, and they disappear.
Oh, right.
That's coffee badging.
So, basically, sort of, not bunking off school or anything like that, but it's that's interesting. I mean, look, I take maybe a bit more of a holistic view than most. I think post-COVID, I would have liked to have seen a different way that we do things in this country. For example, I don't think anybody should still necessarily have the stress of getting that 6-7 a.m. packed commuter train. If you're paying thousands of pounds for a season ticket just for the privilege of standing up, I think they could be
dreadful.
Exactly, and I think there are millions of people that obviously it's hugely depressing, and it's your income. So I think if there is a more of a structured way of coming, maybe if you come in to the office at 10 as opposed to 8 o'clock.
I don't disagree with that.
So you can have this flexibility. We should do things differently to make lives for people a lot more easier. And if we have flexi working, that's absolutely.
But also,
fine.
let's stop having that cliff edge of the train fares. So you then have that premium price, don't you? And then at 9:30 or whatever, it then drops significantly. Why?
Yeah, exactly. It can be more balanced. So things like that, I would have thought we'd be, but you have to then understand that if you're going to work from home for 2 days a week, if you're in the office 3 days a week, hopefully, in your, if you're okay, of course you can put on the washing. You might go out for lunch or walk the dog or whatever it is that you've got to do. That can't go hand in hand with what Labour were trying to bring in, which I think they've now scrapped, is the idea that your boss can't email you after 4 p.m. I mean, you can't have it both ways. Either have the flexibility, but understand that actually
they should be in
everything
politics.
is transactional.
I get messages in the middle of the night, don't you?
Well, I do, but
I don't want to know. I really
you
don't want to know. But it's true. I mean, I get up at 2:20 in the morning, which is a very antisocial hour. By then, because obviously I go to bed early, I've got tons of messages by 2 o'clock in the morning.
But no one's asking you to reply to them. I mean, you know, if your bosses are emailing or whatever...
Well, if I don't reply, they think I'm dead.
Well, that right, yes. Well, maybe you should reply to those. Reply to those ones.
Maybe I should. But also, what's interesting about this is because people got so used to home working, they've moved homes. So they're now miles away from the office. They've allowed their children to get into school and so on. So it's a problem.
Yes. But this idea, look, you know, if you are the boss of a private company and your productivity levels are high or still maintained, or if you're happy, then that's one thing. But if you're a public service worker, if you're a civil servant, for example, get in the office.
Well said, Charlie. Listen, thank you so much for being here this morning. Just a very quick question. When are you joining Reform?
It's been lovely to see you. And I've had a wonderful time. And, you know, politics is
So when is that? Next week?
Politics is
next
very
month?
Interesting. That's very kind.
Next few months?
You're tempting me almost to an offer I can't refuse, but it's always nice to see you.
It's always lovely to see you as well. Charlie, thank you very much indeed. Still masses to come on the show. We've got our future politics panel coming up with Salape Elasti and Adam Dale, and much more besides. John Rentoul's also joining me. This is Weekend Breakfast. A very good morning to you.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, Oivamo slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspects in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, very good morning to you just after 8 o'clock on Sunday, March the 9th. 2 hours have gone by already. A very good morning to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining. Great news for you this morning because it's Barbie Day today. That's right, that's why I'm wearing pink. It's a day celebrating the iconic doll. And if you live near a showcase cinema and you go and see Barbie the movie wearing pink today, you'll get a free ice cream.
Hi, Barbie. Hi, Ken. Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie.
It's still It's a rubbish film.
Hi, Ken.
Yeah, hi. It's National Dishwasher Appreciation Day, a day that recognises the convenience that this appliance brings to our lives. Now, Josephine Garris Cochrane came up with the idea of using water pressure to clean the dishes, and that created the concept that we still use today. There we are, that resounding noise when you go to bed, leaving the dishwasher on before it empties the water all over the floor. It's also National Meatballs Day today. It's a hearty homage to the meat dish in all its glory, reflecting traditional recipes to those encouraging a fusion of unique flavours.
Meatballs, 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 meatballs.
Oh, I think that said that. Right, let's move on to this hour's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
So, on this day in 1566, David Rizzio, Italian courtier and private secretary to Mary, Queen of Scots, was murdered in the Palace of Holyrood house in Edinburgh. Mary's husband, Lord Darnley, is said to be jealous of the friendship because of rumours that he had made Mary pregnant, and he joined in a conspiracy of Protestant nobles to murder him. The murder led to the downfall of Darnley, who was himself murdered, apparently by strangulation, less than a year later. On this day in 1973, Northern Ireland voted in favour of staying in the United Kingdom. And on this day in 1995, the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh visited Northern Ireland, their first since the IRA and Loyalist ceasefires of 1994. And those are this hour's fascinating facts.
Weekend mornings we're taking flight. With David Bull, everything feels right. Weekend breakfast, shining like the sun.
Good morning, 5 minutes past 8, Sunday, March the 9th. I'm David Bull, and of course, this is Weekend Breakfast. Now, I do just want to pause in case you didn't hear it already this morning. Happy birthday to my baby sister, Katie, who is 50 tomorrow. Yes, that big round number, Katie, 50. So a very happy birthday to you. Cannot wait to celebrate with you and the rest of the family tomorrow here in the capital. So I do wish you a very happy birthday indeed.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear. Happy birthday to you. Ting bong.
Do we have the pictures of Katie there that I can just show very quickly for those people who are just waking up? Hopefully we have Davis and his trigger fingers are standing by, hopefully, to play the... Have you got the pictures, Davis? Yes, probably somewhere. Anyway, I do wish you a very happy birthday. He's all over the place, apparently. Oh, here we go. So my sister on the left there, that was... Oh, look, we look very fancy there, don't we? We were obviously going out there, so happy birthday to you. And there's my sister there, my brother-in-law, who looks quite regal in that particular photo. It's the only time he actually does look regal. And then there's the family. We were all on the holiday celebrating as a family. And then I think there's one more. I can't remember what I put in this morning. And there we are, surrounded by all her nibblings, nephews and nieces and so on. Happy birthday to you, Katie. Let's now just turn our attention to the headlines this morning. It's quite interesting, actually. All the papers taking slightly different stances this morning, but one of the stories, and we have talked about this extensively, the Sunday Telegraph here, Farage, reform infighting will only hurt us at the ballot box. That's everywhere as well this morning. The Sunday Express this morning, 6.6 billion cost of asylum seeker. Wait for this. Support schemes, including tennis lessons, visiting the Arsenal stadium, sandwich delivery, friendship services. I wonder who sanctions all of this. The BBC says... this is Samir Shah, the chairman of the BBC. Apparently, the solution to all the ails of the BBC is to hire more Northerners. This is a terrible story. The Mail. Welcome to the UK. Gunman who says death to all Jews. This is Abdu Wadi, a Palestinian, makes a victory sign, declares, "Thank God we arrived in Britain." He is not an innocent man. He is a militant who has called for the slaughter of all Jews and posed menacingly with an AK-47. He's a former member of a group that terrorised Israel. He has filmed himself chanting about killing Jews and posted a string of messages depicting running battles with the Israeli Defence Forces. He called for Allah to punish Jews completely. Turn him away, deport him immediately. So those are some of the front pages this morning. Loads of messages coming in. Louise, good morning. Just saying, David and Charlie, great show. Thank you very much. I love you both. That's very sweet. Reference Angela and her hatred of little villages. It will never happen. This is about overturning the planning laws so that she can build her houses in villages in the countryside. It will never happen. No builders, no materials, because of green madness. And land and planning, it's already in place for the large builders. They're not going to buy expensive land. Louise, thank you. This one says, I'm getting so sick of the government. First spread migrants around the country. Now London's homeless. Who's paying for this? Well, we are. Local people, and Labour said no more personal taxes, so they force up council tax. What's the difference? Stephanie says, best weekend show. Thank you, Stephanie. That's very sweet. Thank you. Debbie in Surrey says, surely, David, if all the benefits were stopped, people would stop coming to this country. Also, Sophia, good morning. David and Charlie, I love you both. Great show. I wanted to say I think Rupert Lowe should have been made deputy for Reform. He's used to managing and running businesses and a very clever man. I'm a member of Reform, but finding all of this very distasteful. Also, on the migrant crisis, I mentioned Ipswich. Also, I happened to be with Richard Tice in Boston and Skegness. I could not believe my eyes just how many migrants there are in the centres of Ipswich and Boston and various other towns. This one from Gary says, if you go into Bournemouth, David, and you walk down the high street, it's like another country. David, I totally agree with your earlier message. Farage isn't a leader. He's a brilliant campaigner, but a good leader protects the assets, not see everyone with talent as a threat. His ego isn't allowing him to lead well. Regards, Dan. I tell you what, let's continue that conversation about Reform, shall we? It's time for the Future Politics panel.
The Future Politics panel.
Well, joining me this morning, Salapi Elastis, journalist and podcaster, Adam Dale, political commentator. Good morning to the two of you.
Morning.
Lovely to see you. New hair, lovely new hair.
Thank you.
And obviously we met your father yesterday.
Yeah,
Jim.
we have some interesting opinions, I guess, between us both.
Well, I mean, he's quite radically left.
I'd say I'm more moderate than he is. He probably admits that himself. Radically left, I think, is a bit harsh, actually.
No, he isn't.
Yeah, maybe for your taste, not for mine.
Okay.
I think he's has a lot of common sense with certain scenarios.
And you're a fan of the green agenda?
In the main, yes.
Okay.
I think it could be
and the
more
pace of the green
more realistic in its pace, but at the same time, it's a very important issue.
Okay. Shall we talk about Reform? We've been talking about it all morning. It's the front page of the Telegraph this morning. Nigel Farage has warned that Reform UK's hopes of electoral success will be damaged if it descends into further infighting over the expulsion of one of its MP. He says the row with Rupert Lowe, who's been kicked out of the party, of course he's lost the whip, so he sits as an independent, has dented the sense of unity. It's such murky business. Meanwhile, and I will put the other side of this, Rupert says, let me be abundantly clear, I'm the victim of a witch hunt. There's no credible evidence against me. None has been provided. Reform has removed me from the party before the investigation has started. They've conflated the complaints to insinuate I'm guilty. I will not tolerate this. I've informed lawyers. I've tried to restore communication. They won't talk to me. There were 5 of us. We could have got in a black cab, so getting together is not exactly difficult. And to be fair to him, actually, he gives his salary, his MP salary, to charity. He doesn't actually take it. Meanwhile, Lee Anderson, the chief whip, says, well, Reform can't go on with Rupert Lowe as an MP, so it cannot function. So he is saying that Rupert needs to step aside from the party. Then you've got Rupert Lowe calling Nigel a messiah and saying he's a control freak and he doesn't allow people to have a say in the governance of the party. Ben Habib has waded in, dragging me into it. Where do you stand on this?
I think it is very, very murky business.
Yeah.
I agree with the idea of making sure that someone is held to account if they've done something wrong. However, the timing of it is not great. This comes the day after he criticised Nigel Farage.
Well, yes, but that isn't the full story, which I then got hold of. So I now understand the chronology that I have been told, which is allegations had been made from the Parliamentary Office and also from the Constituency Office. They were being investigated internally. That investigation, my understanding is that Rupert may have known about, or did know about that investigation because he was asked for evidence, and protecting, obviously, staff is paramount. And then he decided to do that article with the Mail, and then all hell broke loose.
Okay, so essentially we were kind of told later, but it was something that was in the works. Okay.
That's my understanding.
Yeah. Ultimately, it still is very messy.
Yes.
I think the fact that he had come out and said that about Nigel Farage the day before is not great. You know, I think Nigel Farage is right in the sense that infighting is not something that people want to see. It's something that's majorly off-putting, and part of the reason why we have a Labour government now, because of what happened with the Conservatives.
I would agree.
Yeah, I just want to touch further on that point about the Conservatives. I think people were looking, and I'll openly admit I'm not a traditional reform voter in any sense of the word, but people were looking...
Is there such a thing?
Probably not. They probably are the newest bloc in politics. I'd say they hoover up the sort of right-hand side of the political debate, and what you've seen is this big sort of schism in the right wing of politics, where the Conservative Party is basically split in half, and people with a more right-wing agenda have gone to that side. But what you're looking at is, from every angle on this story, it's bad news for reform.
Is it game over?
I mean, I don't think so, because I think there's still a sense of dissatisfaction countrywide, whether it's rightly or wrongly pointed at the government. I think that Rupert Lowe, actually, I find it quite funny that I'm agreeing with a reform candidate, because that's usually something I wouldn't do. But Rupert Lowe, actually, in this scenario, he's making a very good point. There is very little structure to the Reform Party.
I'm not sure that's fair, actually. There wasn't, and certainly the structure has been put in place by Zia Youssef. Now, Rupert has ramped up the rhetoric this morning, or late last night, calling for Zia Youssef. This is the bit I can't quite understand. So he says Nigel is too controlling, and therefore he needs to relinquish control. And at the same time, last night, he tweeted, "Take back control and sack Zia Youssef." Well, you can't have it both ways.
To an extent. I think there's a little bit of a monopoly on the control of reform, and I think there's a big question.
That's fair.
There's a big question mark raised when you're looking at, and I don't agree, and I don't like Elon Musk at all, but he's questioned Farage. Now one of his insiders, Rupert Lowe, is questioning Farage.
What does Elon Musk know about the workings of reform?
Not a lot. Nothing. But he clearly has connections, and he has quite large connections, it looks like, with Rupert Lowe. Is this a inside job? Is this a purge on both sides, or is this just infighting to gain control of the party? It's quite interesting as an outsider to look at it from that perspective.
I was actually going to say, I think there are two things here. I think his issue is that he feels Nigel Farage is controlling, but in terms of the wider party, he feels like there needs to be more structure. I think there's two things there that he's saying.
Do you think part of the problem is you've got two very successful people who are business people in their own right? Nigel was a trader, Rupert is a gentleman farmer, he was chairman of Southampton Football Club, very, very, very successful, 67 years old, probably not very good as a team player?
I don't know, I wouldn't like to jump to that conclusion, because I think the way things are played out...
Or not used to working as a team, let me put it that way.
Potentially, I don't know, but I do think that because of the way things have played out, it can seem as though he's the outlier and he's the one causing the trouble. But like you said, this is something that's been in the works for a while, so we don't know, what's been said behind closed doors or what else is happening. So I think he can be made. It kind of feels as though he is being scapegoated a little bit, notwithstanding that if he has done something wrong, it does need to be addressed.
Rupert Lowe, actually, I think, and Rupert's a friend of mine, I think Rupert's been an incredibly successful Member of Parliament. He's the one that found out about the immigration, the number of hotels that we're still using, how long they're going to be used for, another 4 years, and so on. He has done great work for his constituents. He's not taking the salary, he's giving the salary to charity. Just in terms of the optics of this, My concern is it's disappointed those people who have looked to Reform as a new political party and a way out of the two-party system.
The unity. The unity is lacking, and it's one of the main reasons why the Conservative... I mean, we looked for the last 10 years at the Conservative Party ripping itself into shreds over predominantly Brexit, but lots of other smaller issues. And it's a very damaging thing for a party to go through, where you've got, especially a party of what is it, 5 MPs at the moment?
4 now.
4. So if you times that by X amount, how many of these people are actually all fighting for the same?
Yeah, but hang on a minute. But all political parties have problems, don't they? So,
yes.
So there's always infighting and all of that for lots of reasons. One of the problems has been, and I made this point earlier, that without... So the thing that Rupert has failed to understand here is that without Nigel, he wouldn't be there, because Nigel called Rupert to stand in the European Parliament elections and he became a European Member of Parliament. He called me. That's how I ended up as a member of the European Parliament. So without Nigel, without the party, without the structure, Rupert would never have been elected. That being said, Rupert put his own money into the election campaign and fought a very successful election. Isn't this teething problems?
Potentially teething problems. I actually think there's a slightly more of a wider issue with regards to how Farage is operating as the leader of Reform.
Go on.
I think it's basically his way or the highway in this scenario, which, I mean, people can draw parallels to Trump in America, his way or the highway. Is it successful? In a political sense, it can be. Not that I agree with it, but it can be. And I just think this is quite a dangerous territory to be in, considering how small the party is. To have fractures now, you could say it's a blip and a purge, and they're just trying to get through it.
Or would you? Or is the counter argument that actually it's good to have it now?
Well, yeah, I'd say it's a bit premature to say that this is going to be the end of the party. I mean, we gave the Conservatives a very long rope before we got to this point. So I think it's early days. It's not great. It probably won't be the last thing we see, but I do think it is part of the political animal. There's going to be infighting at some point.
What do you think about this message from Rachel? Waking up to more of the same about Reform is so depressing. It was our only hope. I think there's too much testosterone in that group of 5 sorted out boys.
Potentially that's what it is. I don't know, but I just think Rupert Lowe feels like he's been backed into a corner, and I think he's fighting now.
I mean, it's very unedifying, however you slice and dice this. He has written an article where he says business, football, politics, dirty games, all of them. He talks about the fact he's trying to meet with Nigel Farage, that it's been turned down. That isn't actually true. Ben Habib actually waded in and rightly said that Rupert financed his own campaign. He paid for it. He had very little support from the Central Party. I know that, but also because the Central Party wasn't in a position to provide that support. And I know that from Ben's own campaign when I supported him in Wellingborough, for example. There wasn't... The party just didn't have those kind of resources. Just in terms of that, what the political parties, and it is a problem that political parties rely on donors, and it's important that the donors stay with the party. Mohammed Amersi, a former Tory donor who paid $25,000 to a tender fundraiser, he said if the divisions continue into the time of the election, they will not be electable. People will not fund it. It's too early to say. What's the answer here, do you think?
They have... Well, it's not for me to try and heal the Reform Party, but from the outsider's perspective, if they don't unify, they're as good as dead in terms of a political party, in the sense that the most unified party usually wins an election. So if you look at it from the Labour perspective, they had their left-wing kind of movement towards Corbyn, and they've come back through that and moved more to the centre, and they've become quite unified under, okay, you hate him or love him, under a new leader. So I think that there is the benefit of it.
So what's the test here? So looking at the opinion polls, this is YouGov, Labour on 26, Reform on 25, so still second at the moment. Opinion, Labour 28, Reform 27. The local and mayoral elections are coming up, 1,500 candidates being fielded. So if the party does well in the locals, and it is expected to do well in the locals, although this may derail it somewhat, if it does well in the locals, is that the end of the matter?
I wouldn't say it's the end of the matter. I think the next general election will be the end of the matter. That's when we'll really know the impact in which they've had. But for a party like Reform, they are new enough that one donor or 2 donors pulling out could spell really difficult times ahead for them. So I think that's part of the reason why he's so keen to get this done with, to make sure it doesn't affect that funding.
And, you know, a week is a long time in politics, isn't it?
Well, a very long time, and I think this could be a storm in a teacup scenario for a lot of people, and I guess it's a depressing news if you're a Reform voter, quite pleasing news if you're not. Even for the Conservatives, I think they'll be looking at this and thinking, how do we benefit from this?
I'm really pleased you brought that up, actually. So Kemi Badenoch, and I did think this was fascinating this morning. So the Conservatives have said the Human Rights Act should no longer apply to immigration decisions. They're saying there should be a change in the law, and that would stop people challenging their deportation on human rights grounds. That's a bit of a game changer, isn't it?
Yes and no. How easy it is.
Or are they playing into the Reform playbook?
They're playing into the wing that they lost from their party. And they're very much on the defensive
Does it get the wing back?
Too early to say, I would say.
What do you think? So what she's making the... So I've long said we need to leave the ECHR and we're a grown-up country and we can make our own laws. But what she's saying is actually we can stay within the ECHR framework, but we disapply it to immigration cases so that you don't get the ridiculous nonsense of some man being kept in the country because his son doesn't like foreign chicken McNuggets.
Yeah, the story for me was the Zimbabwean paedophile who was saying that you know, he would be treated differently if he was to be deported, and that's the kind of thing that the Conservatives are talking about. I don't think they are playing to the base that they lost, because if that was the case, they'd be saying get rid of the ECHR, but they're not saying that. They're saying that we can keep that.
But do you think they're doing that on purpose? Because Reform's position is to ditch the ECHR. Kemi Badenoch is coming out with something slightly different here.
I wouldn't say so. I'd say, even though, you know, you may disagree with me, I would say they're trying to align with where the government is now, because in terms of the European Union, Labour is trying to, I guess, soften what Brexit looks like. So I think actually they're just more in line with what is going on right now, but then obviously putting their own stamp on it in that they want to disallow it.
After the break, we should be talking about the softening of the lines and Brexit and alignment with the EU, and in the same time stuffing the farmers. We'll talk about that after this break. Don't go anywhere. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
What do we gain from having Ukraine in the middle of Europe occupied by Russia if the peace isn't...
Well, it's not going to be... It won't be occupied by Russia because he's going to do the mineral deal. America will then have skin in the game. They'll be... Ukraine will be full of Americans. Putin will never invade. And by the way, Putin is so depleted by this war that he thought he would win in 2 weeks that he won't have the ability to invade anywhere, I would suggest, for a decade.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'm joined this morning by Sholape Alashe. Good. And Adam Dale, which was much easier to say.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of our Future Politics panel. Let's talk about this big story, shall we? In the Express this morning. If you're just waking up, this will wake you up. 6.6 billion quid cost of asylum seeker support reveal. This isn't for board and lodging. Taxpayers shelled out 6.6 billion on asylum seeker and refugee support schemes, including visits to the zoo and tennis lessons and sandwich deliveries and friendship services, and also a trip to see Arsenal. This helps them integrate. How about actually learning English? This also is about Wethersfield Asylum Accommodation site. £20,000 spent on sports coaches, equipment for activities such as volleyball, tennis and athletics. Befriending scheme, so refugees get a mentor. They've had visits to London Zoo, Kew Gardens, Arsenal's Emirates Stadium. £1 million has been spent. £1 million has been spent on SIM cards for mobile phones. Apparently, you have to have at least 60 gigabytes of data. What?
I think there's different parts of this you can take out, because the real underlying question here is: do you agree that we should be taking asylum seekers? I think
no, it isn't. That isn't the underlying question. The underlying question is, why do they need to go to the zoo?
No, but then the follow-up question to that is, we should be letting them integrate, or making them integrate. Now, I agree that the English classes are probably the more important integration pieces, and I think this plays into a wider subject on anything to do with government spending, which is there's always gaps, there's always things where we overspend and we could cut back, and I completely agree. There is waste, you can clearly see it in this document, in this article, but actually there are some things in there, the sports, the fitness, the health. Why not? Why not integrate people into society?
What about actually looking after the poorest in society and giving them tennis lessons and sports coaches and making sure they're fit so that people eat healthily and they don't die of cardiovascular disease?
I do agree. The trap we're going to fall into here is if we're allowing the asylum seekers in and we don't let them integrate, we don't help them integrate, they're just going to be the poor people.
But isn't the answer to learn English? I'd much rather the money was spent giving them Duolingo, sticking that on their phone.
Do you know, this is something that I think this is the first go-to when it comes to asylum seekers, but actually in terms of the numbers coming over that don't speak English, it's a very low percentage in terms of the numbers, so I think that's really important to remember.
Is that
because
true? I don't know.
I think so, yeah. I was doing some research yesterday and I believe it's not as much as people would think it is.
So do they need tennis lessons? And a visit to art, they need that?
No, they don't.
No, okay.
I do think that there is some waste going on here, and I do think that there are more important things that allow people to integrate, and these things are not necessarily mandatory or necessary for integration, so I don't think it's a waste of money.
What do you do with 60 gigabytes of data? Why do you need that much?
Honestly, I can't answer that.
I don't know. That.
But I do think that there is just a mismanagement.
Can I just ask you, though? I mean, we were obviously talking about asylum seekers here, which is one thing, but also in terms of illegal immigration, and we've been talking a great deal about Rupert Lowe. He was the one that found out we have 218 hotels still active. They're still going to be used for the next 4 years. 25,000 illegal migrants have come to the UK since Starmer came to power. So obviously what is going on is not working. We've got 38,000 housed in hotels. 3,200 illegal migrants have come already this year. The weather's really good. We're seeing people on dinghies. It's a perilous crossing. People will die crossing the channel, and we need to stop it. Any thoughts? What if you were advising the Prime Minister, what is the answer? Is it closer cooperation with France, who aren't doing very much, it seems, giving them millions of pounds? Is it turning the boats back? Is it, I don't know what it is. What is it?
I think it's having a better structure when people do come here, because one thing that I think we can say is that it's actually almost impossible to stop people completely coming over. You can have as many deterrents as you want, but if people want to come, they're going to come.
But Australia managed it.
Yes, but
they
then
turned
again,
the boats back.
Yeah, that's fair. And I'm not saying that it's not possible, but what I'm saying is that to completely stop it, I think is a myth. I don't think that that's possible.
Is it a lack of political will?
I think it's obviously a very taboo subject that the government deals with.
People get so angry about this.
Yeah, they do. Rightly so in some scenarios, because there are people and there are extreme examples of things that are highlighted in the media where you've got illegal migrants and you've got asylum seekers, and there's all sorts of these frankly stupid stories, I think, where we're talking about very extreme cases of waste. And if you go back to your Australian example, I mean, they've managed...
like the Albanian migrant not deported because his son won't eat foreign chicken nuggets, the Pakistani paedophile father not deported, the woman granted asylum after joining a terrorist group, the Zimbabwean paedophile allowed to stay in the UK. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and these are the extreme examples, and I don't think...
There seem to be a lot of them.
3 out of hundreds of thousands, I don't think is... I mean, we can debate numbers all day, I guess, with these sort of things.
A convicted Sri Lankan paedophile allowed to stay in the UK because he's gay, even though he molested 3 young teenage boys.
Yeah, I mean, who would agree with that? That's an obvious...
But this is why I don't understand why they're allowed into this country. I just don't understand. And so if I don't understand and politicians don't understand, why does no one do anything about it?
But what is the answer? There's no easy answer to this.
I think the answer is to have a forceful deterrent in the channel. I think it's to turn the boats back. It's also to have offshore processing and not to give everyone 5-star hotels.
I don't think they're necessarily giving them 5-star hotels.
Well, I can tell you, certainly when I go back to some of the hotels, they're given 3 meals a day and they're in a hotel which is more than most people can do in this country. Those people living on the breadline, the elderly who've lost the winter fuel allowance.
There is an awful lot of waste in this system, an awful lot, and there's no easy answer, and that is the harsh reality of it.
And that comes back nicely to reform and what's going to happen in the local elections, and we'll see how that plays out. We'll take a quick break. After the break, I'm going to be talking about Keir Starmer. He wants to cosy up to Europe. But in the meantime, as a result of that, it's going to be a £1 billion blow to British farmers. What joy. This is Weekend Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Welcome back to Future Politics panel. Sholape and Adam join me this morning. I'm not doing the surname thing. Let's talk about this. Keir Starmer plans to reset relations with the European Union. yes, as we know, he wants to cosy up to the European Union. And look, I understand it. He wants to remove the trade barriers so that it's easier for goods to go from the United Kingdom to Europe and from Europe to the United Kingdom. However, his answer is to have dynamic alignment with the European Union. Now, the problem with all of that is it would negate the whole point of Brexit, which was to take back control, and the fact is we can do things differently. One of the things that we do differently now is gene editing. And this is a £1 billion business. So this is a huge industry centred on the development of drought and pest-resistant crops. We're now a world leader, actually, in terms of research into gene-edited fruit and vegetables, which, of course, is believed that you can make them more less like... They don't need as much water. They can be, as I say, drought-resistant, and therefore it may then be able to be used to feed people who are starving in the world. Is the answer dynamic alignment with the European Union? Is that really the answer?
I do think that's quite a vague term being used.
Well, I'll tell you what it means. It means that the EU will make us adhere to European Union rules to allow the free flow of goods. That's what that means.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because the gain that we get from that, we have to balance that against the loss that we have. And you're talking about one. Okay, it's a very
£1 billion quite a lot of money.
Yeah, £1 billion quite a lot of money. But what are we losing on the other side by not being
sovereignty?
There's a different debate around that entire sovereignty argument completely.
But wasn't that the point of Brexit? People voted not to be part of a supranational bloc.
I think people voted for many different reasons for Brexit.
I'd agree.
And I don't think sovereignty was the sole reason. I think it was some people's reason.
Take back control.
Take back control, yeah, but have we really taken back control?
No, because we've got a load of weak, lily-livered people in government.
There's this... Whichever way you look at it, it looks like Brexit has so far failed, and
Rubbish.
So I would say so.
So far, but
especially young people.
Okay, that's interesting. So dynamic alignment.
I don't know if it's the worst thing in the world, and I say that because especially when it comes to like food and drink, I think there's a reason for some of these regulations. I feel as though there's nothing wrong with it, honestly. I know that will rub people the wrong way, especially if they voted for Brexit. But, I mean, we're talking about food here.
But we're not actually, are we? We're going to start... It's a mission creep. I know the European Union very well. It's a mission creep. It will start with whatever and pesticides and all the rest of it. It will end up with monetary unions. They want us back in. They need us back in. The whole point, and I made this point yesterday, was post-Brexit, the coalition of the willing and the European Union teaming up with the United Kingdom and supporting the defence of Europe is a watershed, actually, because we've almost come full circle. We're now past Brexit. They don't... Once the defence of the realm and the many realms is in peril, they no longer care about the size of our Mr. Whippies.
I think, though, that is then the government's job to make sure that they draw their red lines in terms of what will be betraying those who voted for Brexit and what will not. I think that's what's important.
If they have dynamic alignment, will the public forgive the government?
That's a good question. I think it depends on what issue they choose to do it with. I think that's what's important. What is it that they're accepting?
Isn't it the principle?
Well, you could say but I think, you know, they talk about the spirit of the law, right? And I think with things like this, if it's helpful for us, then why not? But if it's something that they feel as though is going to, I guess, torpedo Brexit and completely undo it, then that's a different matter.
There's this whole concept, I think, around Brexit that if we don't do it completely as hard as possible, that everyone's going to be disappointed that voted for Brexit. Actually, if you look at the polls nowadays, a lot of people think Brexit was a mistake.
But we haven't Brexited.
Well, this is the point.
We've managed to annex Northern Ireland. We've put a border in the Irish Sea. We've basically said, oh, we don't care about Northern Ireland.
This is the point
of
a completely disunified Conservative Party, and this is where we can both probably agree in the middle, which is that the Conservative Party, whether you agree with Brexit or you don't, there was no fully fledged plan.
No,
it was a watered down version, and we've somehow might be very lucky with how we end up with America based on this alignment, because actually being sitting outside the European Union and the wildness of Trump, we may have actually by accident with Brexit be in a position to benefit from America.
And I say bingo to that. That's a brilliant point.
But at the same time, that is that was never discussed during the Brexit debate, and it's pure chance and accident that we do have quite a volatile American president who, give Starmer some credit, has cozied up to him in a very good way.
I agree, and across the party they all stood up, didn't they, in the chamber and said he had done a great job. I just want to ask you very quickly about naturism. It's a battle for 21st century naturism. Apparently, naturism is on the rise. This is according to a poll. 1 in 7 of UK adults describe themselves as nudists or naturists. I'm just really interested in this. The British Naturism 9,000 strong membership has been growing fastest since 1964. Are you a fan of getting naked on the beach?
I'm not sure. I think it's probably very freeing, but for other people on the beach, freeing. I'm not sure about that.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? What do you think? I think young people are particularly interested in naturism. That's the bit I find very odd.
I guess young people are a little bit more liberal-minded in most senses, and will probably... Well, being young, you've probably got a better body, right?
Yeah, well absolutely right. Because the people who are normally naked on the beaches are not the ones that really should be naked.
Well, true, and actually that's the vast majority of people. You kind of don't really want to look at them. So what's the difference?
And would you be welcoming of being free on the beach?
I guess it's up to. There's always going to be some weirdos, aren't there? That's the trouble. There's always going to be some weirdos in those scenarios, but in general, leave people to make their own decision. I guess there's a sort of freedom element to it. Why not?
Well, why not? And apparently here's the advice for you. If you do venture onto a nudist beach, the best thing is to get on with it. Get everything off. This is according to a veteran nudist. Just like going in the sea, sometimes it's better to dive straight in. So there you go. Thank you ever so much for your time this morning. Sholope?
A lattaché.
A lattaché, good. I'll get there in the end. And Adam Dale, that was this morning's Future Politics panel.
The Future Politics panel.
Oh, so many messages coming in about illegal migration. I said, what's the solution? How would you stop it? Easy, says Tim. We are an island. We have a navy. Kim just says, stop the boats. Yeah. David, will you stop calling these sport migrants asylum seekers? They're illegal people who don't come from dangerous warlike countries. They come from France. Why are you treating them to enticements when we should be sending them back? This shows that Labour are settling these people and not deporting them because they want to demoralise the citizens of this country. Good morning, David. This is Margaret in Tunisia. Oh, Margaret, how are you? I'm in Tunisia. I know. With regard to your panel, why should we help immigrants integrate? Their choice, they wanted to come here, so it isn't, the onus shouldn't be on us, it should be on them to integrate. This is Susan. In Liechtenstein, if you don't speak German in 6 months, any member of your family can't speak, you can't work. You're all sent out of the country. Ooh. Good morning, David. Asylum seekers, why on earth are they being labelled like this? A very small percentage may be asylum seekers, but the majority are economic migrants. Stop the access to public money, put them in tented camps, and they will soon stop coming. So many other messages. I'll just read this one quickly. Hi, Dr. D. Great show as usual. Thank you very much. Your thoughts, please. How about Rupert Lowe joining the Tories as Shadow Home Secretary? Mr. Jenrick becomes leader. Boris Johnson comes back, sets some policies unpopular to the secret Lib Dems in the party. You think it would be a winning formula? Couldn't possibly comment. And I'll just do one more. Trevor N. Harrow says, good morning, Dr. David. I'm still voting reform in the local elections. Even with the infighting, they'll get over it. I'm never going back to the Tories. It was a lying, abusive relationship. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. We'll take a break. After the break, Rupert Bell will join me, of course, our royal commentator. Lots to talk about there, particularly about Meghan Markle. She's had the second series green-lit already, that dreadful thing there. We're also going to be talking about the King's music playlist as well. He's included. This is about Commonwealth Day, of course, which is tomorrow. The Commonwealth, a third of the world's population, very important in my eyes. And, of course, the King has chosen music that represents him and the Commonwealth. We'll talk more about that with Rupert after this break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
And I think you'll find that many people in this country think that Keir Starmer is one of the worst prime ministers we've ever had. And if you can find me a tranche of people who don't think that, then good bloody luck to you. You can probably put them on
He's
the
a very
taxi.
unpopular prime minister, but, Mike, the opinion polls show that public opinion actually thinks he's handled the Ukraine situation quite well.
Yeah, but, you know, you can't just hang on to that because everybody knows that you might think he's handled it well. I mean, are you really seriously going to tell me that when you watched him last Thursday in the Oval Office, you didn't sit there and just cringe?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 8:50, Sunday, March the 9th. Lots of messages coming in. I'm asking this morning, based on this reform story, is the party over for reform? Your thoughts, please, on all of that. 0344 499 1000. Calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word Talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X at talkTV. David, is Starmer purposely trying to damage farming so we need to import more food and sort of give him the excuse to tell him we need a closer tie to Europe? Or we may die of hunger? Yeah, let me know what your thoughts are, please, on all of that dynamic alignment with Europe. What was the point of the Brexit vote if you do that? Because then you essentially haven't left. And therefore you mitigate any upside of Brexit. Anyway, keep all of those messages coming in, please. But now it is time for Rupert's Royal Roundup.
Rupert's Royal Roundup.
Oh, good morning, Rupert.
Yeah, Rupert's been a name that's been in the news a bit this week, hasn't he? But anyway.
Yes, it wasn't you, though, I understand.
Well, much to my relief, I think, probably.
Now, shall we start with Meghan Markle? Now, as you know, I'm not her biggest fan. The series, what's it called? With Love Meghan. Yes. Where essentially she gets chocolates that she's bought, shoves them in some plastic, wraps a ribbon around them and passes it off in a kitchen that isn't hers, in a house that isn't hers, to friends that aren't hers.
Well, I think the friends... Well, there's a couple of... Well, there's the makeup artist, there's a chef, and a few other people drop in. But having watched it and given up 8 hours of my life, I have to say, these friends, it's not really... These friends are just props.
So when you wait. So you've watched 8 hours. What was it like?
I can't get the 8 hours back, basically.
Yeah.
It was twaddle, basically. But we do now know that another series has been commissioned and filmed. And I believe it was filmed in January. So what we're going to get, though, is... Clearly, there were a lot of very negative reviews, so they've already shot it, so presumably they aren't, unless they edit it slightly differently, it might be more of the same, which if we see more food being put into more plastic bags, then I think we really are scraping the barrel. There was nothing, there didn't seem to be too much original about it. So it is interesting. Her contract comes up for renew there with Netflix in, I think, a couple of months, so it will be interesting. So it may have been that they just wanted to get the value for money out of the Sussexes, and that's what they've done.
I mean, you know, you can argue it a number of ways, but what it has done, Netflix loves the controversy. Everyone's talking about it. They're all saying, I mean, there's some brilliant lines here. Who was this? One of the reviewers said it was a gormless lifestyle filler with a tangible desperation.
I don't know. I can't tell you exactly who said that, but that is very much par for the course. Yeah. I think, you know, this is the problem. There's nothing new about it. There are lifestyle programs left, right and centre. There's nothing original. But actually, as you know, sometimes there's no such thing as bad publicity. So for Netflix, they must be going, you know, something awful people watch out of a sort of ghoulish fascination. But as you open up the first episode, you've got the bees, and then within 10 minutes, you've got the now much parodied moment of salted pretzels being put into a plastic bag for a guest who was coming to stay that night, which was going to be put into a box and then carried up to her house where this guy was staying, her long-standing makeup artist. It's been much lampooned, but it set the tone, and basically just right labels seem to be the other thing. And she does have very nice writing, but you know, but apart from that, there's not much else.
Is that the best comment, that she's got good writing?
Well, I don't know. I've seen it. I mean, mine's absolutely appalling. I don't know what your penmanship's like, David.
Oh,
but
I'm a proper doctor. You can't read it.
Oh, right. So no chance then.
No.
Absolutely zero chance. Anyway, hers is neat and tidy.
Right. I love this one. It says, this was another reviewer. This is The Telegraph. The series is an exercise in narcissism filled with extravagant brunches, celebrity pals and business plugs.
Yes, well, the main thing is, one of the business plugs is you can get, there must be a part of As Ever, they may be selling $20 balloon pumping machines, because she proudly potted one as she was blowing up some balloons for a children's tea party, which we never saw. And then they were proceeding to give them some party bags that had the most extraordinary non-children friendly things in them.
Like what?
Anyway. Well, there were some seeds, manuka honey, just generally. Anyway, I disagree with the party bag concept, because when you go to a party, you should be giving to the person who's giving it, not expecting something in return. But that's maybe I'm an old fuddy-duddy when it comes to children's tea parties.
I think it's very American.
Well, I think over here you now have to parties. You know, children's get upset if they judge parties by the party bags, I believe.
But in my day, you got a piece of moist cake wrapped in some sort of napkin, so it all leaked through, and you were lucky to get that.
Well, exactly, but you know, I think that things have changed, David. Party bags are the thing. But as obviously Meghan is telling us, that make sure the child feels appreciated.
Right. I am very mindful it is Commonwealth Day tomorrow. The Commonwealth, a third of the world's population, a very important part of, obviously, the King is the head of the Commonwealth. It's an interesting point, this, because the King is now sort of walking this tightrope, because you've got the United States saying they're going to reclaim Canada as the Trump is 51st state. Of course, Justin Trudeau not very happy about all of that. Meanwhile, the King is being wheeled out to appease Donald Trump. Now, as part of Commonwealth Day, he's released a musical playlist, hasn't he?
Yes, well, Bob Marley, who knew that he was? He's very fond of a bit of Bob Marley, and goes back a long time. And you know, he's had, and he believed Bob Marley, Kylie Minogue, I think Grace Jones. We'll get the full list tomorrow, but I think it is more important. The Commonwealth Day is a hugely significant day for the King, and the music is part of that. But actually, I think it is more the soft power element of it, and it is very interesting. Remember when they had the Commonwealth Day service last year, the King gave a video message. The Princess of Wales wasn't there either, but I believe both, you know, the King will be there, and the Prince and Princess of Wales, along with the Queen, will all be in attendance. And it is a significant day because there is all this, you know, the way the world is in a sort of bit of a fragmented state. And it is saying the power of the Commonwealth to unite. And obviously you referred to there Canada, where the King is the head of state. And by all accounts, Donald Trump and his sensitive ego was a bit upset to see the King being photographed with Zelensky, because, you know, and he might now be cooling to Britain, because, you know, it seems a bit of a slight to him, because, of course, he does want everything to be about him. And Canadians are obviously feeling a little bit sort of blindsided, flummoxed with this sort of claim that America Trump wants Canada to be the 51st state. But it does show the King and the power of soft power. And that's been the unique thing about the monarchy and what it brings for Britain, because he is able to pick up the phone without necessarily it being you know, when we see Keir Starmer go, we know it's staged very politically to create something. With the King, it's under the radar, but might have a way of achieving results. And obviously at the moment, there's a lot of sensitive things going on which are fragmenting people's views. So for the King, it is a very important time for him to be able to exert his influence, and particularly within the 56 nations that are part of the Commonwealth.
And of course, as you say, tomorrow is when the list is going to be launched of the King's playlist. Bob Marley, I can see him singing Kylie, I Should Be So Lucky, dancing around the kitchen. I can see that. But he also went to see Ray. I didn't even know who Ray was.
Well, I must admit, I had to look up and think Ray, and there were one or two others that were not on my musical radar because, but you know, he does have a genuine love of music, and I think what he's trying to reflect, and you know, these things are slightly sort of skewed one way or another to reflect what the message is overall. But I do think it is. He does love music and all that entails, and the power of music. Yes. Whether it be from opera, from all stretches, and I think that's probably an important message. The way the music, and we know, has an ability to unite. Because if you like a good bit of music, you can be from any political walk of life and enjoy it. And I think that's part of the message as well that he's trying to get over. So I shall be looking forward to the playlist.
Rupert, thank you ever so much. We'll continue after this break.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, Oivamo slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's just after 9 o'clock now on Sunday, March the 9th. I'm David Bull, and this is Weekend Breakfast. Thanks very much for your company this morning. Now, if you are just joining us, great news. It's Barbie Day today. That's right. It's a day celebrating the iconic doll. And if you live near a Showcase cinema and you go and see Barbie the movie today wearing pink, you'll get a free ice cream.
I'm a Barbie girl in the Barbie world.
Nothing would make me go and sit through that film ever again. It's also National Dishwasher Appreciation Day. That's right. It's a day that recognises the convenience that the appliance brings to our lives. It was actually invented, or the idea was invented, by a lady called Josephine Garris Cochrane. She came up with the idea of using water pressure to clean dishes, and of course that created the concept that we still use today. Amazing. And also, it's National Meatballs Day today. It's a hearty homage to the meat dish in all its glory, from traditional recipes to those encouraging a fusion of unique flavours. Happy Meatball Day!
We love meatballs, meaty, meaty balls, meaty, meaty balls, meaty, meaty balls, meaty, meaty balls, meat eat balls. I love meatballs, you love meatballs.
Right.
We love meatballs, meaty, meaty balls.
Yeah, we love meatballs. And the time is 4 minutes past 9. Let's move on to this hour's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
Right, on this day, I just had Dean in my ear saying I'm going to die. On this day in 1950, Timothy Evans was hanged for the murder of his wife. However, 3 years later, John Christie admitted killing her and several other women. On this day in 2015, archaeologists began excavating up to 3,000 skeletons from a burial ground under London's Liverpool Street Station. It was the burial ground for Bedlam. Do you remember Bedlam, the hospital? It was used from 1569 to at least 1738 and included bodies belonging to victims of the Black Death. And on this day in 2022, Sir Ernest Shackleton's lost ship, the Endurance, was discovered almost 2 miles deep off Antarctica, 4 miles from where it was slowly crushed by pack ice in 1915. Underwater drones produced stunningly clear images of the 144-foot Polar Explorer's ship, which had remained intact after more than a century underwater, with gear piled against the taffrail as Shackleton's crew had only recently left it. And those are this hour's fascinating facts.
Breakfast, feel alive and right. With David Bull, everything's just right.
La la la, good morning. Welcome along. National Meatball Day, of course. So a meatball is ground mince rolled into a ball with other ingredients: breadcrumbs, minced onion, eggs, butter, seasoning. Originally in the Middle Ages, it's called pomme d'orange. It's also included in the recipes from Rome, apparently. Yeah, so there you go. It's actually a dish that's been eaten in many countries. In Albania, they have meatballs with feta cheese. Who knew that? In Bosnia and Herzegovina and Serbia, they're called kufta. It comes from the word, the Turkish word, kofta. Of course, we know about kofta. Ground beef or ground lamb. In Great Britain, of course, known as faggots. Now, when I was at school, we used to have faggots for lunch. A faggot is traditionally made from pig's heart, liver and a fatty cut of pork, minced together with herbs, added for flavouring, and sometimes breadcrumbs. And I'll leave you with one more word: albondigas, if you're in Spain. I think that's enough about meatballs. Good morning, welcome along. 6 minutes past 9. Lots in the newspapers this morning. This civil war with reform isn't going away anytime soon, it seems. This is the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. Farage: reform infighting will only hurt us at the ballot box. That's in that paper. It is in many other papers as well. I'm going to be talking to John Rentoul in just a minute, who is chief political commentator at The Independent, about that. Also, lots of other things going on. Commonwealth Day tomorrow, of course. The King is calling for Commonwealth unity in uncertain times. A third of the world's population, of course. As Rupert was talking about, just how important the Commonwealth is to the King and also to the late Queen as well. And the King walking this very difficult tightrope here because, of course, Donald Trump is saying he wants to take over Canada as the 51st state of the United States. Of course, Canada is part of the Commonwealth, an important part of the Commonwealth. And the King also has been wheeled out by Keir Starmer to try and ease that relationship with Donald Trump. Meanwhile, you've got the coalition of the willing. That's all going on as well, looking at the solution to Ukraine and how they ensure that Ukraine's safety and security going forward. This is a big story that will upset you this morning. Sunday Express: 6.6 billion cost of asylum seeker support. Yes, that's right. No, this isn't hotelling. This is about actually trips to Arsenal, things like trips to the zoo and tennis lessons, and 60 gigabytes of data for a mobile phone. £1 million spent on mobile phone SIM cards. Sunday Times, the BBC says this is the solution to terrible programming, apparently. They need to hire more Northerners. Then this is a shocking story in the Mail. Welcome to the UK. Gunman who says death to all Jews. This is a Palestinian, Abu Wadi, makes a victory sign as he arrives in Britain and declares, "Thank God we arrived in Britain." He is not an innocent man, however. He is a militant who has called for the slaughter of all Jews and posed with AK-47s. He's a former key member of a group that terrorised Israel. He filmed himself chanting about killing Jews, posting a string of pictures depicting running battles with the IDF. He has also posted a video on his Facebook page last September calling for Allah to punish Jews completely. Find him, turn him round, deport immediately. And this is an interesting article, and I'm not surprised at all, in The Observer. Britain's amongst the hardest hit by COVID fallout 5 years on. Britain performed worse than other developed nations in its response to the COVID pandemic. The UK spent more money than most other countries on economic help, and yet many still ended up with larger drops in life expectancy, more people too sick to work, huge levels of homelessness, soaring mental health problems amongst young people. It's 5 years since the COVID pandemic, and we're still seeing the effects and ramifications of COVID. Let's return, though, to our top story this morning, and this is about Reform UK. Nigel Farage has warned that Reform UK's hopes of electoral success will be damaged if it descends into further infighting over the expulsion of one of its MPs. So this is the row which we talked about extensively with Rupert Lowe, one of the 5 MPs who has lost the whip. Essentially, he's been kicked out of the party. Now, Farage acknowledged that the public doesn't like political parties that engage in constant fighting. He says that he and the party and Rupert Lowe, they tried to keep a lid on what was going on, that this has been simmering for a long time. Now, just to remind you, there had been one allegation from the Parliamentary Office, one allegation of bullying and harassment from the Constituency Office. There was also a Labour MP who said that Rupert Lowe had shoved him, I believe in the chamber, actually. We'll talk about that as well in a minute. Farage says that what we need to do now, and by the way, donors are saying if this continues, we're going to pull our money from Reform UK. Farage says the party must now come together, form a united team, 4 square behind the candidates. Now, don't forget, we've got the local elections, the mayoral elections coming up, 1,500 candidates being fielded in those elections. And it is thought that Reform UK could do well in those elections. The question is, does this actually change anything? And does this mean that the public's appetite and love of Reform UK will evaporate because of what is going on? John Rentoul, chief political commentator at The Independent, joins me this morning. Good morning, John.
Good morning, David. Happy Barbie Day.
Thanks very much. That's why I'm wearing pink.
Actually, I was more impressed with the appreciation of Dishwasher Day.
Yes.
I thought I was just looking at my Bosch this morning.
Oh, were you?
Well, I mean, you don't want to tempt fate, because I've had it a very long time and it is incredibly reliable.
Yes. And you don't want a leaky Bosch.
And I want... And I want to say thank you to it publicly.
Quite. And are you a fan of meatballs?
No.
Oh.
No, that was the one day that I will not be celebrating today.
I see. OK, fine. Well, I won't serve you that for dinner. Right, let's look at this reform thing. It's still going on. However you slice and dice this, it's really unedifying, isn't it? You've got 4 million votes, 5 members of Parliament. You've got essentially a public spat going on between Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe being played out on social media. And then Rupert accusing Nigel of having a messianic complex and, you know, running the party his way, and then says he needs to relinquish control. Meanwhile, he then says you need to exert more control and sack Zia Youssef. However you look at this, the optics are dreadful.
It's not good. The 2 people who are most pleased about it are Kemi Badenoch and Keir Starmer. I mean, Keir Starmer has made it quite explicit that he sees reform as the main threat to the Labour vote at the next general election. He'll be cheered up by this. I mean, obviously the next general election is a long way off, but I mean this does not help. And I'm afraid to hear Nigel Farage say, you know, you've got to stop all this infighting, is a bit rich, coming from the leader of the party who could have stopped it and has actually started it. I mean, if he'd just reined in his ego a little bit and treated Rupert Lowe with a bit more respect, I don't think we would be where we are today.
Do you think the problem is that, and I've been thinking about this a great deal, you've got 2 very strong men of a certain age who are very successful in their own rights. Rupert Lowe, a gentleman farmer who obviously has done very well, was chairman of Southampton Football Club. not used to working as part of a team structure. I think it's fair to say. I would say that to Rupert's face. Nigel, of course, has been used to being a protest party. That is where he comes from, with UKIP and obviously the Brexit Party, and chucking insults at the European Union. And of course, now that he's elected into Westminster, I think it's fair to say he's still learning as well, because it's a very different skill set.
Absolutely, and Nigel Farage has a reputation for not being a team player himself. I mean, when he was in UKIP, that was riven with constant infighting. In a way, he tried to sort of solve that problem by setting up the Brexit Party as a private company, so that. There wouldn't be that kind of divisive democracy, which he's recently relinquished. So the Reform is now going to be a democratic party. But the problem is all its members were drawn to the party by Nigel Farage, and so they'll be loyal to him. But what he hasn't learned is how to work with colleagues. So you're quite right. It's a clash of two egos. But I think as leader, Nigel Farage has to take responsibility for the situation.
I mean, when you saw that interview with Harry Cole here on Talk, I think Nigel sort of took the bait, didn't he? And you could see how angry he was in response to those accusations from Rupert Lowe, which were put to him by Harry.
Yeah. He should have. You've got to have a tough skin in politics. I mean, you know that, David. I mean, you've got to put up with an awful lot. And Nigel Farage is not good at that. He really didn't like the fact that when Rupert Lowe came into Parliament, he was a better parliamentary speaker than Nigel Farage was. I mean, he made an instant impact. People were commenting what a brilliant parliamentarian he was. He's a great self-publicist, got a lot of attention to himself, and you could tell that Nigel Farage really didn't like it. I mean, because he was the leader of the party. He'd just come into Parliament. He wasn't, as you say, he was on a learning curve. He wasn't very good in the Commons in the early days. I mean, he was fine. I mean, made some good speeches, but it's not his natural environment, and he obviously resented Rupert Lowe from the start. And when that Elon Musk thing happened, when Elon Musk said that Nigel Farage was had to go, and he quite liked the cut of Rupert Lowe's jib, although he'd never met him. He liked what he read on the internet. That obviously went down extremely badly with Mr. Farage.
And of course, I would agree with that. I think Rupert has been a fantastic parliamentarian. He is not afraid to speak his mind. He's actually done all these FOIs. He's found out about the immigration, the state of immigration, the number of hotels that are being used, how long they're going to be used for, and so on. Yeah. As you say, Elon Musk actually throwing his weight behind him, I agree totally. Nigel would not have liked that in the slightest. But then, so I have tried to get to the bottom of what's going on and the chronology of what is going on. This is my understanding, that these accusations were made against Rupert. The investigation started internally and was carrying on, at which point then Rupert did that article for the Mail. Then the party decided to make public what was going on. That is my understanding, having spoken to people who would know about these things yesterday. Yeah. Now then, just to add even more sort of flames to the fire, Lee Anderson, Chief Whip, then comes out yesterday and says, well, Reform cannot continue with Rupert as part of Reform. Now, there'll be a lot of people who've been drawn to Reform who will be very mindful that's not what they want.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, whatever you think of Rupert Lowe, he's... he is a phenomenon. He has been extremely successful in promoting himself and promoting the Reform message, and the party needs to work with him. But it's not going to. I mean, I do think. Actually,
do you think he's out?
I think this is the end of it. I mean, I just think the way that Nigel Farage operates, he's not gonna forget and forgive. And I think Rupert Lowe is too proud to humiliate himself and grovel if that's what the party requires of him. So I'm afraid I think that's the parting of the ways. And Nigel Farage is already moving on. I sense he wants the rest of the party to pull together. But at this rate, he's going to end up with with just one MP, and that'll be him by the next election.
I mean, the other thing that I'm very mindful of, and I spoke about it earlier in the show, but I thought about it in bed last night. Without Nigel, Rupert wouldn't have been an MEP. Rupert wouldn't have stood for Parliament, because it was Nigel that called Rupert and asked him to stand in the European elections in the same way that Nigel called me and asked me to stand. And that's how we ended up in Brussels in the first place.
Yes, of course. I mean, of course, yes, the party owes a huge amount to Nigel Farage, but in return, I would say that Farage owes the party something, which is to try and make it work and try and work with his colleagues rather than to fall out with them constantly.
Well, I think, knowing obviously the people involved, the thing that Nigel cherishes the most is trust.
Yeah. Well, yes, I mean, yeah, obviously, and he doesn't trust Rupert, and he's made that very clear. But I think, you know, the truth about politics is you have to work with people you don't trust. You have to work with people you don't particularly like, people you resent, people who you suspect are after your job. But you know, you've got to make it work, because politics is teamwork. And you know, Nigel Farage is not going to do as well at the next election as a one-man band as he could do if reform were a team effort. And it looks like he's decided to go for the one-man band.
So you said right at the beginning you need to have a thick skin in politics. Look, when 5 members of Parliament were elected, Nigel called me and asked me to stand down as Deputy Leader, and I completely understood that. I wasn't an elected Member of Parliament, so therefore it made sense to hand it over to Richard. Ben Habib took it rather differently, and we've seen Ben on manoeuvres. I think I'm saying that gently. And Ben has written Reform was always going to win seats in the general election. We were polling at 16% before Nigel appointed himself leader. We then got 14% of the vote, which was bang in line with our polling. The seats we won was down to the hard work put in by hundreds of loyal activists who worked for years under the leadership of Richard Tice, David Bull and myself.
Yeah, well, Ben Habib is entitled to be a bit bitter. I mean, you'd be entitled to be a bit bitter if you wanted to. But I mean, actually, you seem to be pursuing the more sensible course, which is
not working here.
Well, no, but which is not to go off in a big sulk and start attacking your former colleagues. And I think, you know, I mean, Ben Habib is wrong, I'm afraid, to suggest that, you know, Reform could have done perfectly well without Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage coming back to the leadership of Reform at the beginning of the election campaign really turned things around, really destroyed the Tory party. I mean, and incidentally gifted Labour a huge majority, which some of us pointed out the irony of. You know, I mean, it wasn't rocket science. You could see that if Reform did well, then Labour were going to benefit.
And we spoke about it, didn't we?
Yeah, absolutely. But the next election is going to be a bit different because you know, you'll have had a Labour government. You'll have a lot of people who will be disappointed with that Labour government by the end of the parliamentary term, who may well be looking to Reform as an alternative, or the Conservatives. And I'm afraid what's happened recently is going to make people think that the Conservatives might be a better bet as the opposition.
I mean,
party.
one of our viewers actually said that Rupert Lowe should join the Conservatives. I mean, that's where he came from.
Well, maybe he will.
Maybe he will. So what does this mean for Reform then?
Well, it just means that they're not going to do as well as they could have done, you know, I think people ought to be clear where the blame lies for that, which is with the leader of the party rather than with Rupert Lowe.
Can I just ask you also, I mean, one of the things that Reform has done is to goad the Conservatives into some sort of action. There's another story this morning where the Conservatives, and this is quite interesting, about the Human Rights Act. As you know, Reform UK's policy is to leave the ECHR. The Tories have come out with something slightly different. They're now saying the Human Rights Act should no longer apply in immigration decisions. They're saying there should be a change in the law to stop people challenging the deportation on human rights grounds. I read that this morning and I thought, well, that's very interesting.
It is, and it's going. I mean, that is. They're going to try and force a vote in it on that in Parliament this coming week. I mean, it's not going to succeed, but it is interesting what the positioning is. And what I thought, I was really struck last week by Rishi Sunak giving a long interview to Nick Robinson of the BBC, in which he said that in the end, if he had to choose between secure borders and the ECHR, he would choose secure borders. So the Conservative Party has moved a lot on that issue. I'm not sure if it's pressure from Reform that's doing it, or pressure from events and from Rishi Sunak's experience as Prime Minister and his frustrations with trying to deal with the small boats.
Let's do a Kemi update. How's she doing?
Well, not brilliantly.
No.
I have to say. I still have... I like her. I think she's an interesting politician. I think she's different from most of the other ones in obvious respects, but also just in the way she talks. I think she's very direct and clear. But she is not performing well against Keir Starmer in the House of Commons, because I think Keir Starmer has learnt how to deal with her, and he patronises her dreadfully, as she points out. But I think her pointing that out doesn't really help her cause. I mean, I think that's not going well. But I think the Conservative Party's problems are much more fundamental than the leadership. I mean, I think whoever was leading the Conservative Party would be in a terrible state at the moment, because the party has just lost an election because millions of voters feel betrayed by the record of the last government.
Let's just finish by talking about Keir Starmer. It's been a while since I've spoken to you, but Keir Starmer is in a very interesting position, and I was saying this is almost a post-Brexit dividend, where he is the conduit between the United States and the European Union. So sitting there right in central position between those two powers, not being part of the European Union actually has given us, by accident, a huge amount of leverage here. And then cross-party... all said what a good job Starmer has been doing, and particularly when James Cleverly stood up and said what a good job Keir Starmer was doing, I was a bit flabbergasted.
Indeed, I mean that was a very interesting session in the House of Commons. Keir Starmer being praised from both sides of the House, showered with praise. And even more significant than that, I thought, was we had a lot of briefings from European leaders and European observers saying how well they thought he'd handled the European summit. Yes, he has certainly risen to the level of events, but I'm a bit sceptical about this idea of him as a bridge between the US and the EU, because Donald Trump keeps blowing up his end of the bridge. It's a bridge to nowhere as far as Keir Starmer's concerned. I mean, he's very much part of the EU position. He wants to support Ukraine, wants to strengthen Ukraine, and Donald Trump is absolutely determined to do the opposite.
John, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Go and look after your dishwasher. John Rentoul, chief political commentator there at The Independent. We'll take a break. After the break, it's going to be our week in politics. Joining me this week is Alistair Stewart, who's Scottish columnist and political and public affairs expert. So if you remember, I'm going to ask him, in his view, which politician has had a good week, which has had a bad week, who we should keep an eye out for, and who should have a week off. That's all coming up here on Weekend Breakfast.
I mean, this is one of the. This story is really. I mean, it's the kind of stuff that you can make movies out of. It's not just these guys, but if you remember, there was this big story about Wirecard. Wirecard was a huge German fraud. It was like a Ponzi scheme, looking like a fintech company. The guy in charge of it was this German wunderkind until he fled. When the police went after him, he fled to Russia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk. Thanks very much for all your company and your messages as well. Dr. B, this is Betty. How are Reform looking for candidates in Scotland? They're sending emails to support, but no information on candidate selection or to apply. All a done deal, not in my understanding, and I know there's a very strong team up in Scotland. Tice was not great on his trip to Glasgow. I would run or support, but not for a predefined boys' club. Betty, get in touch with the local association and the country manager, actually, for Scotland. I can't answer that any more than that, though. Lisa says, good morning, Lisa. David, Nigel is all about himself. Parties evolve. Rupert is needed in Reform and Nigel should step aside with his buddy chairman. Good morning, David. Now, today is National Meatball Day. I have been telling you this. Great show. David, this is Jerry in the Cotswolds. Good morning to you. David, you need to try venison meatballs. They are delicious. Sounds nice. Actually quite good for you, I think. Good morning, Dr. B. You're looking fab as always in another fab shirt. It looks warm in the studio this morning. Thank you. At the moment, it's no Farage, no Reform success. This is Steve. Morning. He needs to keep a tight hold on the party for now, and once and if they won the next election, there's a legacy after 4 years of him being Prime Minister to hand on to younger MPs, as he would be almost 70. That's right. Hang on a minute, let me work that out. 60, yes, so he's got to be 61. Good morning, David, says Brad in Cambridge. Let me think, would I rather be in a tent with no money in France or a 4-star hotel with gifts and benefits in the UK? Not much of a mystery, is it? This is quite interesting. Sue, good morning. Sue says, Reform don't have enough women in place. I've written several times to point that out, but never get a reply. Actually, there are tons of women in Reform. I was happy to see their rise and joined a while ago. However, I think Rupert Lowe is the best leader. Farage is too big for a democratic system, much like the other big heads in politics nowadays. David, about stopping the boats, why don't we put tariffs on goods from France? Also remove all licences and rights to fish in UK waters. Hi, David. Great show, as usual. Just on the subject of learning the language, a few years ago I was offered a job at Harlock TV in Wales. I was given 12 months to learn how to speak Welsh. If I didn't, then my contract would be ended. Maybe we should do the same thing with these illegal migrants. That's Jerry in Bury. Thank you, Jerry in Bury. But now it's time for the Week in Politics. Joining me now is Alistair Stewart, who's a Scottish columnist and political and public affairs expert. Good morning to you.
How are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Now, we're going to talk about Scotland. Scotland's really interesting. Someone's just mentioned Scotland here. And my understanding, and I don't know if this is true, but everything is to play for currently in Scotland, and I think there is an enormous amount of sort of shifting going on currently. I've asked you to choose who's had a good week, who's had a bad week, someone we should keep an eye out for, and someone who should have a week off. So from your point of view, out of all the people you could choose, who's had a good week?
I've cheated slightly with this. I'm going to say that from the get-go. I think the First Minister, John Swinney, has had a very good week, but in many ways that's by virtue of who he is not. He's the new First Minister. He's been in post for about a year now. He passed his first successful budget at Holyrood, and now he's come out by saying that he wants to have a summit of all civic leaders in Scotland to tackle the threat of right-wing extremism. Now, this is where the cheat comes into it slightly. Yes. Mr. Swinney has done this to prove his credentials, to prove that he is still the steady hand. He's going to go into next year, as a recent poll has found, that the SNP are not doing too well. They're losing quite a lot of seats to Reform. They're losing quite a lot of seats to Labour Party, and the Conservatives are breaking even. But nevertheless, he's still in the headlines. He's still coming across as the sensible man about town, and he feels quite statesman-like, and he still continues to do so. He may not agree with what he has to say, but he's still coming across party politically as a man who is a sensible leader.
OK, but surely John Swinney should be concentrating on the poverty, on the deprivation, on the drug deaths that are happening in Scotland, instead of actually talking about far-right extremism in Scotland.
This is it. This is my caveat of a cheat for he's had a good week, but this is my topic of my
but a bad season.
Yeah, absolutely. Topic of my Scotsman column tomorrow, where I'm saying that he's convening all of these people together. A big summit in April, by all accounts, but there are a plethora of issues that have happened on his watch, under the SNP's watch, for 18 years. You'd struggle to find anyone who could throw a rock at any issue that he names and not find the SNP a little bit culpable in some way. Because 20 years, as you may recall, that fabled once-in-a-generation vote on independence, well, that's kind of coming up to a generation here, and these are systemic problems, some of which you've named, on his watch.
Very much so. And Scotland is, I mean, just in terms of the Barnett formula and how much we pay per capita, I mean, Scotland is doing diabolically when it comes to things like health outcomes, for example. I mentioned drug deaths. Again, huge problem for Scotland.
Absolutely systemic. And Scott, you touch on Barnett. It's a really interesting one. That controversial, of course, but these are devolved competencies. So health is unequivocally, however you spin this, is in the ballpark of the SNP. For years, they've pointed to Westminster cuts. They've turned Westminster into the bogeyman, but these are fundamental issues of which they have been responsible for. So to blame anyone but themselves, and then to convene as you say, a summit focusing on the threat of right-wing extremism, it's kind of a bit of smoke and mirrors. So, as I say, a good week for Mr. Swinney in that he's still coming across quite statesman-like, but on a policy level, not so good.
You mentioned reform there, but what's the feeling in Scotland? Because it feels to me, and I may be wrong here, that the SNP, as you say, people have woken up and realised that actually underpinning a lot of these poor outcomes is the SNP. So people are now moving to other political parties. Just your sense at the moment, what would your snapshot be if an election was called today?
I think reform would do quite well. You have to remember that in Scotland we have something called the list system, which, long story short, means that in addition to the constituency elections that you have at, say, Westminster, you also have MSPs who are elected for regions, or members of the Scottish Parliament who are elected for regions. Now, that's a collation of votes per party. I think reform on that basis would do very well. The poll that I mentioned shows that they would have an estimated 15 MSPs at Holyrood at 129. That's sensational. That's a real breakthrough for a party that is effectively starting out. But you have to understand as well that the Tories for a very long time have laboured under, no pun intended, whatever is happening at Westminster. They've lost their identity. They've lost the centre-right narrative. So there's, as you say, all to play for in terms of how this election is constructed and won. But I do think there is room for reform to make serious inroads.
Interesting. So that's a good week. Who's had a bad week?
The caveat with reform being, I think, Mr. Tice, who visited Scotland this week.
So tell us what happened, because I know not everyone will know what happened.
In all respect to Richard Tice, he did make a visit to Glasgow to announce the defections of two Scottish Conservative councillors to reform. I think he slightly mumbled his words and couldn't recall their full names. I think he was referring to them as John and Ross. He was somewhat harangued by a group of Scottish journalists trying to get the answer out of him, and he couldn't quite recall. So it was a little bit toe curling, in all honesty. But in fairness, that may say more about the level of recognition that these two councillors had themselves. in addition to that, it was just a series of unfortunate moments. He said that it wasn't going to rain, which is a dangerous thing to say in Glasgow. It did, and which from a PR perspective is a very, very bold proclamation to make at that time of day. And I believe he refused to eat any food, correctly following through in the adage that you don't do anything on camera involving food, as Mr. Ed Miliband may attest to some years ago. So it wasn't the best of weeks for him, but it wasn't catastrophic either.
Right. OK, so that's bad week. Who should we watch out for?
You may remember this name. I think Nicola Sturgeon is my one to watch out for
Where's
this
she
week.
Gone?
That's a very interesting question. So this has been ticking on in the background, that there's a question mark over whether the former First Minister is actually going to stand at next year's Holyrood election. And she was vetted and she's passed that qualification stage. But you also may recall that there's serious questions and an ongoing police investigation into the SNP's finances, Operation Branchform. So that's something of a spectre hanging over Scottish politics. Simultaneously to that, concurrently to that, she's also having something of a popular moment. She was seen dancing and doing a DJ set. Can't believe I'm saying that, with Alan Cummings, and yeah, it's a little bit toe curling, but nevertheless, she is one to watch out for, because if she did stand again, that would be quite a distraction for John Swinney, and it would be quite a distraction for the SNP and the Scottish election.
Extraordinary stuff. And then who should have a week off?
Mary Black. You may remember her as the former SNP deputy leader. I have a lot of respect for Mary Black, I should say. She was elected as an incredibly young MP. She was 20. And she didn't have the best of times as an MP. She suffered from depression and anxiety. She's now turned her hand to comedy. And she's had quite a wave of media attention in the last week or so, because she's been talking about how Holyrood and Westminster are never going to deliver Scottish independence. The reason that she should have a week off is, I think that had she stayed in post, had she run again, she could have maybe delivered her vision of what she wanted to see. But I don't have much time for people who step back and then go to the sidelines and then start shouting about how everything's wrong and it's never going to change. These are passion projects. These are passion issues. And if she wanted to make that change, she should have stayed where she was. So, yeah, the comedy show is going to be interesting, but I think a wee week off would be appropriate.
Alistair, thank you very much. Always good to talk to you. Alistair Stewart there, Scottish columnist and political and public affairs expert. We'll take a break now. After the break, it's tech time. Davis Fang will be joining me. He's got all sorts of things going on this morning. We're going to be talking about Tesla, electric car sales. Oh, this is brilliant, about new technology coming into Tesco, which could change the way that you shop. I love that particular story. We'll talk about that after the break with Davis Fang. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
About 9:43. Good morning, David. Pat says your guest saying John Swinney had a good week is laughable. John Swinney is a disgrace when it comes to women's rights and should be sacked. That's Pat. David, who should have a week off? Keir Starmer for not really doing anything and trying to take the credit from Trump. In fact, instead of a week, can he take the next 4 years off? That's Georgina. Very good, very droll. So many of you getting in touch with this. David, I find it really hard to believe that people think Keir Starmer has done a good job recently. I've watched everything he's done politically lately. I find nothing has changed in my eyes. He's not a leader. He looks false, he sounds robotic, and he doesn't inspire. He surrounds himself with untalented ministers. He's the worst Prime Minister ever, and that's Margaret in Edinburgh. Good morning, Margaret. Keep all of those messages coming in, but now it's time for Tech Rundown. Well, there we are. Davis Fang. Oh, there we are.
Tech Rundown.
Tech fail for Tech Rundown. Good morning, Davis Fang.
Morning, David Bull.
How are you?
Very well.
I don't know why I have to say Davis Fang.
Well, I think Davis by itself is a little bit odd. I don't know why I've got a
It's bit like
surname
David.
for a first name. Precisely, yeah.
Davis Fang.
But now every time I try typing in David on a keyboard, I type in Davis and have to do a backspace for the D. So,
I think you sound like a Bond villain, Davis Fang.
That would be nice.
Yeah,
I would love to play a Bond villain.
You'd be really good.
In a Jaguar.
Yeah.
Not a new one, obviously.
No, not new. Lots going on. So Tesla, there's been a lot about this. Elon Musk, of course, the so-called Nazi salute and all the rest of it. And lots of people not very happy to be owning a Tesla at the moment.
Yeah, I think the problem is that I'm sure, you know, you've seen this in the past. The initial customers who bought Tesla cars were sort of eco-zealots, weren't they? They loved going green, the idea of buying an electric car to save the environment. Well, unfortunately, what Elon Musk has been, you know, showing on his social media recently...
Is that a Cybertruck?
Yeah, that's a Cybertruck. Unfortunately, people aren't fans of what Elon Musk has done, especially earlier Tesla buyers. So they've been rebranding their cars with other names. For example, we've got a Model 3 over here with an Audi badge. We saw a Cybertruck earlier on with a Toyota badge. And the thing is, this isn't out of the blue as well. Like, we've seen a lot of Teslas being vandalized because of the Nazi salute and also the other controversial things that Elon Musk is doing in America. I mean, obviously, we don't like people vandalizing any sort of property at all. But if you do want to protect your purchase, then I do understand that maybe rebranding your car is a decision that you might have to make.
Or you do what I do, which is mine's so filthy you can't actually see what car it is. OK. That's interesting. Now, electric cars, where are we in terms of uptake?
Yeah, so following on from Tesla, it seems like that. So Tesla's sales have dipped a little bit in the UK, but despite that, sales of other electric cars, most namely BYD, which is a Chinese brand, have actually soared. It's sort of insane. So we've been talking about the doom and gloom of electric cars, but actually, if we compare January sales year on year, they've increased by 41%, going from 20,900 to over 29,000 units. So that's actually a lot. So we've been talking a lot about electric cars perhaps not being so popular anymore, but the data actually says otherwise. And so
how much does a BYD knock out at?
A BYD probably starts at around 25 grand, so it's a lot more
much lower
affordable.
entry point.
Yeah, and I would argue like some of the cars are actually better than Teslas. Teslas do have, you know, sort of knobbly rides, cheap interiors, and despite, you know, what we might think of...
Knobbly rides?
I do think they are a little bit uncomfortable.
OK, I think the seat's really uncomfortable.
Yeah, but BYDs, you know, although they are Chinese, it seems like people don't really care and they're buying them in their droves. Actually, BYD is the most popular electric car brand in the UK at the moment. And yeah, I think what's interesting as well is that Mini's electric car sales have quadrupled over the past year.
What sort of range are they doing? Do you know?
Minis.
Yeah.
I think they went up from 140, 160 miles in the older model to well over 200 in the newer model.
That makes a heck of a difference.
Yeah.
But it's still not enough. So 200 miles is fine if you're pottling around. It's not brilliant for long distance because you end up charging a lot.
Yeah, I had the displeasure, rather, of borrowing a Fiat electric car recently.
Oh, yes.
And, well, it's great for tootling around London. If you want to go any, further than that, you do have to, look out for where an electric car charging spot is on your GPS.
Now, can we talk about Tesco?
Sure.
Yeah. So I saw this story and I was like, oh my goodness, I love this. Tell us more.
Okay, so I'm sure we are all pretty fed up of sort of self-checkout.
Hate them.
Seriously, I think there was a survey recently. Over 40% of self-checkout purchases or baskets had some sort of problem with them. And then Tesco's also introduced a thing recently called Scan as you shop. So as you purchase, grab items from the shelf, you scan it and then put it in your trolley. Obviously, this is opens the world up to a lot of scams, a lot of thefts. That is definitely going up. And Tesco, despite a lot of other supermarkets getting rid of sort of this computer automation, they're actually diving right in. They're actually forcing customers after they've checked out to weigh their trolleys on
it's after checkout. I thought this was instead of checkout.
No, it's after checkout. So rather after you get through the gates, you weigh your trolley, and if that aligns with what it thinks it should weigh, then you can leave.
I thought they were going to. You stuck your trolley on the plates, and then it billed you. It knows what's in your trolley.
So you've already scanned the items.
Not interested now.
And the thing is, can you imagine, there being an alarm, your trolley's overweight, and then being the, the queue of people waiting behind you as the Tesco person scrambles to check all of your items.
It still makes me laugh about that unexpected item in bagging area, and there's a horse in there.
Yeah. And can you imagine having a child in your trolley as well? You have to remove them. If you've got unexpected handbags or whatever. I think it's absolutely ridiculous.
Unexpected handbag?
Oh, plenty.
Fine, okay. We'll pause for the moment. We'll continue after this break.
If you read the statement, it says something that happened in his office. It was not Rupert Lowe.
He's certainly accused of many serious things, including threats of violence against the EU.
That I find odd. I do find that odd. But it is, as I said, the initial claim was something took place in his office.
What do you make of Nigel Farage's comments there, saying that none of the MPs would have been elected without him? I think that's true, but I wonder what you think.
It's absolutely 100% true. Rupert has been elected twice.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk 9:53, Sunday, March the 9th. Davis Fang joins me this morning. Where are we going next?
I think we should talk about Apple and AI again.
Go on then.
So we know that the BBC, they've sort of got a thing against Apple at the moment. We had a story where it was taking BBC headlines and then sort of like presenting it with, you know, in a wrong way. For example, Luigi Maggioni, there was a story about him, and Apple intelligence sort of summarized the headline to say that he had committed suicide, which obviously was not true. The BBC is very angry about that. And they've got a new story. Apparently, there is a Louise Littlejohn in Scotland, and she received a voicemail from her car dealership. And basically...
from her where?
From her car dealership.
Right.
And basically, what Apple does is that they take the voicemails and it transcribes it using Apple Intelligence. Unfortunately, it got it very, very wrong indeed. And it was a little bit X-rated, the message that she received back. Obviously, everyone's fine. It was a joke. But people are saying that maybe it's the Scottish accent that Apple couldn't quite understand.
So just reading the copy here, she got a voicemail message on Wednesday from a Lookers Land Rover garage in Motherwell, inviting her to an event. But the service, the artificial intelligence, turned it into a text message which, to her surprise, read, "Have you been able to have sex?" before then calling her a piece of the S word.
Yeah, it's absolutely hilarious. But this sort of goes into our next story as well, which is...
Hang on, I love it. Very funny. Sorry.
Yeah, so the BBC, despite, you know, making fun of Apple's attempt at artificial intelligence, they're actually creating a brand new AI department to create personalised content. So while they hate AI, they are embracing it at the same time. So they're launching a new division called BBC News Growth Innovation in AI, and the goal is basically to make their news more appropriate for younger people. They're aiming towards under 25s, and the idea is to curate news stories to make them longer and shorter. I'm like, the thing is, if you can't trust Apple's AI, why does the BBC believe that their AI will be better?
And also, how much is it costing? And we're paying for it.
Yeah, precisely. But at the same time, I do believe that news corporations do sort of need AI to sort of like create enough content.
Do
to
they?
Serve.
That's what journalists are for.
The thing is, if everyone wants their personalised content...
Well, why don't they just read more?
There isn't enough content to serve everyone's needs at the moment.
Rubbish.
I think that's the case, especially if you're in a newsroom and you can't serve every single audience.
We've been doing it for decades.
The thing is, everyone is asking, well, younger people at least, are asking for personalised content.
All right, where are we going next?
How about we talk about banks?
Yes.
So,
you sounded very Australian then. Banks.
Banks.
Yes.
Yeah. So, there's massive IT failures with banks recently. I'm sure we saw with, with Barclays, HSBC recently. And the thing is that the impact, like if you don't have access to your banking app on your phone or on a website, then it does create issues now, especially as so many branches are closing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like, I know my local branch closed recently, and now it's like an extra 5 miles to go to the next one. And because of that, especially if you're relying on your next paycheck, it does cause a lot of issues. So a number of banks are actually paying compensation.
Wow.
So if you're with Barclays, they're paying a total of 12.5 million. However, if you're with AIB, in total, they're only giving out £590, which I thought was quite amusing.
Bit of a difference. Davis, I think that's all we've got time for, actually, but thank you very much.
Your pleasure.
Always good to see you. Now, you're away for a bit, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
We'll miss you.
I'll miss you.
Thank you. Davis Fang, that was today's Tech Rundown. No, tech fail, tech rundown. Lots of messages coming in. Should we take some voice notes? Glenn is in Suffolk. Good morning, Glenn.
Hi, David. I too like Rupert Lowe, and he has done some sterling work. But ultimately, his ego's got the better of him here. It is a team game, as Lee Anderson says, and that awful interview he did in the Mail. Worst case scenario, this could mean Labour getting another term, and then this country's finished. Farage is the only one with profile and the skill set to challenge Labour. So as much as I like Rupert Lowe, he's been very selfish. Have a good day. Take care. Bye.
Thanks very much, Glenn. Really good to hear from everyone. Can we just do Nigel on reform? Have we got that one?
Nigel from Peebles. None of us who voted for reform know what happened. There needs to be a live video conference adjudicated by the KC they've appointed, where all protagonists, including Zia Youssef, are round a table, they all have their say, and we can all listen to what has been said, and we can all